She replaced her cousin at the airport pickup and picked up a millionaire CEO by mistake. Neither knew this accident would change both their lives forever. The morning came too early, the way it always did in December. Emma Catherine Hayes woke 13 minutes before her alarm, a habit carved into her body by 3 years of anxiety about being late, about losing jobs she could not afford to lose. The numbers on her phone glowed in the darkness. 5:47. Outside, the city was still wrapped in the blue-black silence before dawn. The radiator clanked twice, a metallic complaint against the cold, then fell silent. Emma knew this dance. She reached for the shoe beside her bed, the left one from her only pair of sneakers, and hit the old metal housing twice more. Hard enough to matter, gentle enough not to wake the neighbors who already complained about every sound from her apartment. The heater groaned back to life, releasing a thin, reluctant stream of warmth into the studio apartment. It would last maybe 20 minutes before dying again. She would need to hit it 3 more times before leaving for work. This was survival. Coaxing heat from broken things, making do with systems designed to fail people like her. She lay still for a moment, counting her breaths the way her father had taught her when she was small and afraid of thunderstorms. In through the nose for 4 counts. Hold for 4. Out through the mouth for 4. The same rhythm he had used in his last hours, when his breathing came shallow and desperate in that emergency room. Emma pushed the memory away. There was no time for grief before sunrise. Grief was a luxury, like heat turned above 60 degrees. The apartment told her story in ways words never could. Studio space in Astoria, Queens, $1,850 a month, though it had been $1,400 when she moved in 3 years ago. The landlord called it market adjustment. Emma called it slowly drowning. The window held a crack sealed with duct tape she had painted over in gray to look intentional. Canvases leaned against every wall, 47 in total, all unsold. The refrigerator hummed its tired song, holding half a carton of eggs, 4 remaining, a loaf of bread with 5 slices left, peanut butter, and a pitcher of tap water. The filter cost $3 less per week than buying bottles. Emma sat up and reached for the envelopes on the nightstand. She kept her money separated by purpose, each envelope labeled in her careful handwriting. Rent due Friday. Food. Utilities. Art supplies. She counted the bills in the first envelope with the practiced speed of someone who had counted money too many times. $1,683. She was $167 short. Again. The word echoed in her mind like a sentence handed down by a judge. 3 days left. Today was Tuesday. She moved to the second envelope. Food, $47. The third envelope, utilities, held $89. The fourth, art supplies, contained $12 and some loose change. Emma did the math that poor people do every morning, the invisible arithmetic that decides which need gets met and which gets deferred. Heat or breakfast, phone bill or rent, medicine or groceries, the calculations that kill people slowly, the way they had killed her father. She chose cold cereal with water. Milk cost $4.29. Water was free if you did not think about the chemical taste. She turned the thermostat down to 58 degrees and put on 2 sweaters, layering them the way you learn to do when winter means choosing between warmth and money. The coffee maker sat unused on the counter. Coffee meant spending money at work, where she got it free. The memory came without warning, the way grief always does. 18 months ago, St. Vincent's Hospital. Her father on a gurney in the emergency room, his face gray, his breathing labored. Pneumonia with complications from undiagnosed diabetes. The financial counselor had been kind, her voice gentle in the way of people who deliver bad news professionally. Without insurance, treatment is $47,000 up front. We can arrange a payment plan, but we need $10,000 deposit for ICU. Emma had $2,400 in savings. Not enough. Never enough. Her father gripped her hand from the gurney, his fingers cold. "Baby girl, don't go into debt for this, promise me." She tried to argue, but he cut her off with a coughing fit that brought blood to his lips. "Promise me you'll keep painting. Promise me you won't let the system tell you your art doesn't matter." He died 6 hours later in the waiting room. The bill that came after was $8,700 for emergency services rendered. Emma still paid $150 a month to the memory of a man the system decided was not worth saving. Emma dressed in the dark, saving electricity. She pulled on the black slacks from Goodwill, $8, and the white blouse from Target clearance, $12. The outfit she saved for anything that required looking like she belonged in a world that constantly reminded her she did not. She brushed her hair, pulled it back into a ponytail, and studied her reflection in the bathroom mirror. 26 years old, and she looked tired, the kind of tired that sleep could not fix. The walk to the subway took 15 minutes. She could have taken the bus, but that cost $2.75 each way. Walking was free if you did not count the cost to shoes or the cold that settled into your bones. The morning air bit at her cheeks. Christmas lights blinked in apartment windows, each one a small reminder of the season she could not afford to celebrate. She passed a mother and daughter waiting for the school bus, the girl's breath making small clouds in the freezing air. The mother adjusted her daughter's scarf with hands that moved with the unconscious grace of love. Emma looked away. Some losses you learn to live with, others you just learn to avoid seeing. The Painted Cup opened at 6:30. Emma arrived at 6:15, the way she always did, the way anxious people who cannot afford to lose jobs always do. She unlocked the front door with the keys Linda had trusted her with 3 months ago. The cafe smelled like old coffee and cinnamon, warm and familiar. Emma moved through the opening routine by muscle memory. Start the espresso machine. Check the milk. Arrange the pastries Linda's sister baked each morning. Fill the register. Turn on the lights. By 6:25, the cafe was ready. By 6:28, she was not. Linda Morrison arrived at 6:30 exactly, punctual in the way of women who had worked too many jobs to ever be late. 52 years old, manager of the Painted Cup for 6 years, night shift worker at TCVS for 8. She carried herself with the weary dignity of someone who had survived a divorce at 45 and started over with nothing but determination and a daughter who needed college tuition. Linda took one look at Emma and saw what Emma had tried to hide. "You okay, hun?" Emma forced a smile. "Didn't sleep great." Linda studied her with the knowing eyes of a woman who had seen her own struggles reflected in younger faces. She did not push. That was one of the things Emma loved about Linda. She understood that sometimes kindness meant not asking questions you already knew the answers to. "Take the window station today," Linda said. "Light's better for your eyes." At 8 o'clock, Rachel Kim pushed through the door with the energy of someone who had already been awake for 3 hours. 32 years old, recently divorced, single mother to Tyler, age 6. Her ex-husband had disappeared 18 months ago, leaving her with a son who needed winter boots and a landlord who did not accept. "My kids' feet are freezing as payment." Rachel tied her apron and caught Emma's expression immediately. The thing about poverty, about being women who lived it every day, was that you learned to read the signs, the set of shoulders, the tightness around eyes, the smile that did not quite reach the face. Rachel knew Emma's expressions the way you know the weather by the quality of light. "Girl, you look like I feel. Rough night? Rent's due Friday." Rachel's face shifted into understanding that needed no elaboration. "Say no more. I'm 200 short myself. Tyler needs winter boots, and apparently kids grow feet faster than bank accounts grow money. Plus, his school wants me to volunteer for the winter fair like I have hours to spare between this job and the night shifts at the grocery store." They stood together in the kitchen, two women invisible to the rushing morning commuters who needed their coffee and nothing else from them. Not conversation, not humanity, just caffeine delivered with a smile that cost nothing to demand and everything to maintain. Emma and Rachel held each other up with the kind of honesty that only comes from shared struggle. This was the conversation that never made it into inspirational stories about overcoming poverty. The daily recalculation, the constant negotiation with survival, the exhaustion that had nothing to do with hours worked, and everything to do with hours spent worrying about what would break next and how much it would cost. Linda had been listening from the storage room. She appeared in the doorway, her face carefully neutral, and slipped something into Emma's apron pocket when she thought no one was looking. Emma found it an hour later during her break. $50, folded small. She went into the bathroom and cried for 5 minutes, then dried her eyes and returned to work. She would try to return the money. Linda would refuse. This was how women survived, passing small mercies between them like secret currencies. The morning rush blurred into the familiar rhythm of orders called and coffee poured. Emma moved through it with the efficiency of someone who had learned to turn off feeling in order to function. Smile at the customers. Remember the regulars' orders. Accept tips with gratitude even when they amounted to pocket change. By noon, she had made $38. Not enough. Never enough. At 2:30, her phone rang. Sophie Hayes, the name bright on the cracked screen. Emma's cousin, 29 years old, event coordinator for Global Reach Hospitality. Sophie's voice came through tight with illness and panic. I need the biggest favor. I know you're going to say no, but please hear me out. What's wrong? I have the flu, like actual flu, fever 102. And I have a VIP airport pickup tonight at 7. If I blow this, I lose the account. Maybe my job. Emma felt the weight of the request before Sophie even finished explaining. She knew what was coming because she knew Sophie, her cousin, who had co-signed Emma's lease 2 years ago when no one else would, who had lent her money for her father's funeral, who had never once made Emma feel small for needing help. This was the math of family, the invisible ledger of who owed what to whom. Sophie's situation spilled out in fragments between coughs. The client was William Chen, an investor from Singapore. $50 million deal. Sophie's boss had told her last month that she needed to prove she could handle demanding clients, the difficult ones, the ones who expected perfection. Emma heard what Sophie did not say. This was a test. One mistake and Sophie would be back to assistant level, passed over again by men who made bigger mistakes and got promoted anyway. Emma thought about saying no. She had a shift at the cafe tomorrow morning at 6. She had never done a professional airport pickup. She could mess this up badly. But she also remembered standing in the hospital waiting room, holding a clipboard with forms she could not afford to fill out, and Sophie showing up with her credit card. Okay, tell me what to do. Sophie's relief came through the phone like a physical thing. Thank you, God, thank you. I'll send you everything. The email arrived 10 minutes later. A photo of William Chen, blurry and distant. A template for the pickup sign. The contact information for the car service Rachel's ex-husband had left her. The only thing he had left her. Instructions typed in Sophie's precise, anxious handwriting. Emma read it 3 times, memorizing details the way she memorized the exact contents of her refrigerator. This mattered. She could not afford for this to not matter. Rachel loaned her the car without hesitation. A 2015 Camry, scratched and tired, but reliable. Emma drove home to change and prepare. She showered quickly, washing her hair even though she usually saved hot water. This was worth the expense. She dressed in her interview clothes, the black slacks and white blouse, the only pair of flats without visible scuffs. She stood in front of the bathroom mirror and practiced the greeting. Mr. Chen, welcome to New York. I'm here to take you to your hotel. The words felt strange in her mouth, formal and professional. She practiced until they sounded natural, or at least until they sounded like she belonged in a world where people had drivers and assistants and $50 million deals. She put on makeup, which she rarely wore, wanting to look credible and capable. She studied her reflection and saw someone playing dress-up. The thought made her angry. She was 26 years old, college-educated, talented. Why did survival require constant performance? Rachel appeared at her door at 5:30 with coffee and encouragement. Remember, Em, confidence is just pretending you know what you're doing until you actually do. What if I mess up? Then you mess up trying. That's more than most people do. Emma drove toward JFK as the winter sun began its early descent. The highway stretched ahead, brake lights glowing red in the gathering dusk. She passed a billboard that caught her eye. Sterling Foundation Arts Gala, celebrating those who create. The image showed a woman, elegant and confident, holding a paintbrush like a wand. Emma felt something twist in her chest. Must be nice to live in a world where art was celebrated instead of starved, where creativity was a virtue instead of a luxury, where people like her were seen instead of erased. She arrived at Terminal 1 at 6:45, 15 minutes early, because anxious people always arrive early. The terminal hummed with the chaos of holiday travel, families reuniting, business travelers moving with purpose, professional drivers in dark suits holding perfect signs. Emma stood among them in her secondhand coat and practiced flats, holding a sign she had printed at FedEx office for $3.47. The sign read William Chen, Global Reach Hospitality. Her hands shook slightly. She told herself it was the cold. At 7:04, passengers from Singapore began streaming through customs. Emma scanned faces, looking for the man in Sophie's blurry photo. And then she saw him. Tall, well over 6 feet, charcoal gray suit, white shirt open at the collar, dark hair styled with casual precision, a black leather carry-on gliding behind him, a watch that caught the light. Expensive in a way Emma could not name but recognized. He looked exactly like the kind of man her cousin's company would serve. Successful, confident, untouchable. He looked tired. That was what Emma noticed first. Before the expensive clothes and the easy grace, he looked like someone who had been running from something for a very long time. His eyes moved over the crowd with the wariness of someone expecting disappointment. When his gaze landed on her sign, he paused. Something flickered across his face. Surprise, calculation, decision. He walked toward her. Emma lifted her chin and tried to channel Rachel's advice about confidence. Mr. Chen? He stopped in front of her, studying her face with an intensity that made her aware of every detail. The crooked ponytail, the coat that had been fashionable 3 winters ago, the sign that was slightly bent from the printer. She saw him see her, really see her, in a way that made her feel exposed and visible at the same time. Yes, he said. You're with Global Reach? Emma Hayes. I'm filling in for Sophie Hayes tonight. Welcome to New York, sir. She watched him process this. Watched the pause before he nodded. Thank you, Emma. Lead the way. They walked through the automatic doors into the December cold. Snow had begun to fall, light and tentative, catching in Emma's hair. She led him to Rachel's Camry, parked in the pickup zone, and felt a spike of embarrassment. This was not the kind of car important investors usually rode in, but he said nothing. He simply loaded his own bag into the trunk, waving off her attempt to help, and settled into the passenger seat with the ease of someone accustomed to making uncomfortable situations comfortable. Inside, Emma started the engine. The heater groaned to life, sputtering warm air mixed with the smell of old coffee and Rachel's son's forgotten French fries. Emma adjusted the mirror, programmed the GPS, and pulled into traffic. Her hands gripped the wheel tighter than necessary. They drove in silence for the first 10 minutes, the city lights beginning to glow against the darkening sky. Was your flight comfortable? Emma finally asked, filling the silence because silence felt like failure. It was. His voice was low and measured, the kind of voice that belonged to someone used to being listened to. Long, but productive. Do you come to New York often? Often enough, though I'm usually too busy to see much beyond conference rooms. Emma nodded, unsure what to say next. She was painfully aware of the class difference between them. The invisible line that separated people who flew business class from Singapore and people who counted coffee money. She focused on driving, on doing this one thing right. Do you drive professionally? He asked. The question surprised her. No, this is my first time actually. I'm filling in for my cousin as a favor. First time? He sounded amused rather than concerned. You seem remarkably calm. Emma laughed, a nervous sound. I'm very good at faking calm. It's a survival skill. What do you usually do? I work at a cafe, the Painted Cup in Astoria, and I teach art to kids part-time, paint when I can afford supplies. The silence that followed felt different. Emma glanced in the rearview mirror and caught him looking at her with open curiosity. Art, he said slowly. That's not something you hear every day from a driver. I'm not really a driver. I'm just a woman who can't say no when family needs help. That's admirable. Or stupid. Emma surprised herself with the honesty. Jury's still out. He laughed then, a real laugh that transformed his tired face into something younger. They fell into easier conversation after that. Emma found herself talking about things she usually kept private. Her father. His belief that art was the most important work in the world because it reminded people they were human. How he had died believing that while the hospital let him die in a waiting room. Your father sounds like he was a wise man, the stranger said quietly. He was broke and uninsured and the system killed him. Emma's voice was steady, but yes, he was wise. The words hung in the air between them. Emma waited for the usual response, the empty sympathy, the awkward subject change, but he said nothing. He simply sat with her truth, letting it exist without trying to fix it or dismiss it. That silence felt like the most generous thing anyone had offered her in months. They talked about art, about the paintings Emma kept in her apartment, unsold and unseen, about how galleries required portfolio fees she could not afford, about how MFA programs cost $60,000 a year, which might as well be $6 million, about how art had become a luxury for rich people who could afford to fail. "What if I told you there are programs that fund artists like you?" he said. "No strings attached, just talent-based." Emma's laugh was bitter. "Those don't exist for people like me. I've tried." The Plaza Hotel appeared ahead, golden light spilling onto the snow-covered sidewalk. Emma pulled up to the entrance, and a doorman moved toward them. The stranger waved him away and retrieved his own bag. Emma got out to help, feeling the cold bite through her thin coat. "Thank you for being patient with me," she said. "I hope I didn't mess anything up for your meeting." "You did perfectly." He pulled out his wallet and removed a $100 bill. "Oh no." Emma stepped back. "I can't accept tips. I'm just helping family." He held the money out insistently. "Please, for your art supplies." Emma's pride warred with need. Need won, the way it always did. She took the money with hands that trembled slightly. "Thank you. Really, this helps more than you know." They stood in the falling snow, two strangers who had somehow shared more truth in 40 minutes than most people shared in years. Emma felt something shift in her chest, a feeling she could not name. "It's freezing," he said. "Would you like coffee before you drive back? The hotel has a cafe." Emma knew she should say no. She had to return Rachel's car. She had work tomorrow at 6. But something in his voice, in the way he looked at her like she was worth the time, made her say yes. "Just 1 cup." The hotel cafe was warm and elegant, the kind of place Emma usually felt too poor to enter. They sat at a corner table. He ordered coffee, black. She ordered hers with a little sugar, no cream. He noticed. She saw him notice. It was such a small thing, remembering how someone took their coffee, but it landed in her chest like something precious. They talked for an hour, about dreams and disappointments, about the weight of other people's expectations, about loneliness. He told her about his sister, younger, gone too soon. He did not say how she died, but Emma heard the grief beneath the words. She found herself drawing on a napkin without thinking, a habit when her hands needed something to do. Quick sketch, coffee cup, hands wrapped around warmth. When she looked up, he was watching her draw with an expression she could not read. "Can I keep that?" he asked. Emma felt her cheeks warm. "It's just a doodle." "It's more than that, please." She slid the napkin across the table. He folded it carefully and placed it in his jacket pocket. The gesture felt important in a way Emma could not articulate. At 10:30, she finally stood to leave. He walked her to the door. "Thank you," he said, "for the ride, for the conversation, for reminding me what it feels like to talk to someone real." Emma drove home through empty Queen streets, her mind replaying every moment. The way he had listened without checking his phone. The way he had seen her father's death as the injustice it was, instead of the inevitability people usually claimed. The way he had asked for her drawing like it mattered. She felt something dangerous blooming in her chest. Hope. At home, she counted her money again. Rent envelope now held $1,733. Linda's 50 from the morning. The stranger's 100. Still short, but less short than before. Sophie texted, "How did it go?" "Did you survive?" Emma texted back, "It was fine. Client was really nice." She did not mention the hour in the cafe, the conversation that had felt like coming up for air, the way he had looked at her like she was someone worth seeing. She opened her sketchbook and began to draw from memory. A man in a gray coat, tired eyes, hands holding coffee like it was prayer. She titled it, "The Stranger Who Saw Me." Emma could not sleep. She lay in bed, listening to the radiator's uneven breathing, replaying the evening in her mind. The way he had paused when she called him Mr. Chen, the slight hesitation before he answered yes. Had she made a mistake? Picked up the wrong person? The thought sent anxiety spiraling through her chest. But no, he had seemed to expect the ride, had mentioned meetings, had tipped her like a client. Still, something nagged at her. The way he had smiled when she mentioned Sophie's company, the way he had seemed almost amused when she apologized for the car. as if he was in on a joke she did not understand. At 3 in the morning, she gave up on sleep and painted. The canvas took shape in blues and grays. A figure in a winter coat, face turned toward falling snow, expression caught between sadness and wonder. She painted until her hands cramped and the sky lightened. Painting was the only language she had for feelings too big for words. Across the city, Alexander Sterling stood by windows watching the same sky pale. He held Emma's napkin sketch, studying the quick lines that captured something essential about holding warmth. When was the last time someone had created something beautiful in front of him without being paid? His phone buzzed. Marcus Chen, his assistant. The text read, "How was Singapore? Board wants debrief tomorrow 9 a.m. Alex did not respond. He was thinking about Emma Hayes, 26, barista and art teacher, daughter of a man the healthcare system had killed. She had talked about her father with clear-eyed anger, refusing to soften the truth, and her paintings. Art as defiance, as proof of existence. That was what Sterling Foundation was meant to support, what his sister Lily had needed and never received. But Emma did not know who he was. She thought he was William Chen, business investor. She had no idea Alexander Sterling ran a foundation with $200 million, that he could change her life with one phone call. He had let her believe the lie. Not quite a lie. He simply had not corrected her assumption. And in that space, he had gotten something rare, a real conversation, with someone who saw him as a person instead of a resource. Alex typed a message to Marcus. "Cancel 9 a.m. I need a personal day." He stared at it before hitting send. 5 years as CEO. He had never canceled a board meeting. But tonight, something had shifted. A woman with paint on her hands and grief in her voice had reminded him why the mission mattered. He wanted that again. But if he showed up as Alexander Sterling CEO, she would treat him differently. Everyone did. They performed, calculated, wanted something. He would find her, see her again, but not as Alexander Sterling, not yet. Just Alex, the man who drank black coffee and listened. He would tell her the truth later, after she knew him well enough to see past the net worth. At 6:15 that morning, Emma walked back to the Painted Cup through streets still dark and cold. Her body ached with too little sleep. Her mind buzzed with too many thoughts. The stranger's face kept appearing in her memory. The way he had looked at her drawing. The way he had said it's more than that with such quiet certainty. She told herself it meant nothing. He was a businessman passing through New York. She would never see him again. The thought sat in her stomach like a stone. Linda was already at the cafe when Emma arrived. One look at Emma's face and she knew. "Oh, honey," she said. "You didn't sleep at all, did you?" "Not much." Linda poured coffee and pushed it across the counter. "Tell me about last night. Was the client awful?" Emma shook her head. "No. He was kind, really kind." Linda's eyebrows rose. "Kind how?" "Just kind. We talked. About real things. He listened like what I said mattered." "Uh-huh." Linda's smile was knowing. And nothing." Emma felt her face heat. "He's a business investor. I was his driver for an hour. That's all." Linda studied her with the wisdom of a woman who had lived through enough disappointments to recognize hope when she saw it. "Be careful with your heart, hun. Rich men who are kind for an hour can be cruel for a lifetime." The words landed like a warning. Emma nodded and turned away to start the opening routine. She would be careful. She would protect herself. She would not let 1 hour of being seen trick her into thinking she could be visible to someone like him beyond that night. But as she arranged pastries and filled the register, she could not stop thinking about the way he had folded her napkin drawing with such care. The way he had said thank you for reminding me what it feels like to talk to someone real. The way her name had sounded in his voice. Emma Hayes. She was real. She existed. And for 1 hour, someone had looked at her and seen proof. The morning rush swept through, demanding and relentless. Emma moved through it with practiced efficiency. Rachel arrived and immediately pulled her aside. "Okay, spill. How was the mystery pickup?" "Fine. Good, he was really nice." Rachel narrowed her eyes. "Nice like normal human nice, or nice like you're thinking about him at 3 a.m. nice?" Emma felt her face betray her. Rachel's expression shifted into concern and excitement in equal measure. "Girl, please tell me you got his number." "He's a business client. I can't just ask for his number." "Did he ask for yours?" Emma shook her head. Rachel sighed but let it drop. They had customers to serve, tips to earn, survival math to calculate. There was no time for fairy tales. But at 2:30, when the lunch rush died down and Emma was wiping tables, the cafe door opened. And there he was, the stranger from last night, wearing jeans and a dark sweater instead of a suit, looking less like a business investor and more like a regular person. Looking, Emma realized with a start, like he was nervous. Their eyes met. Emma's heart did something complicated in her chest. He smiled, small and uncertain. "Hi, Emma." And in that moment, with winter sunlight falling through the cafe windows and the smell of coffee in the air, and Linda watching from behind the counter with wide eyes, Emma Catherine Hayes understood something important. The story was not over. The story was just beginning, and she had absolutely no idea if that was a wonderful thing or a terrible one. In a city of 8 million people, two had just discovered what it felt like to be visible. They did not know yet that being seen would cost them everything and give them everything in return. They did not know about Victoria Ashford, watching from a car across the street, coffee growing cold in her hands as she observed the woman who threatened to take what Victoria had lost. They did not know about Robert Whitmore, opening an email marked urgent regarding Alexander Sterling's whereabouts and unexplained absences. They knew only this: the space between two strangers had suddenly become a possibility. And possibility, for people who had learned to expect disappointment, felt dangerous and necessary in equal measure. Emma wiped her hands on her apron. Alex stood in the doorway, snow melting in his hair. Neither of them moved. Neither of them looked away. The moment stretched, fragile and enormous, like the first note of a song that could either soar or shatter. Emma felt the weight of Linda's gaze from behind the counter, felt Rachel pause mid-wipe on a table across the room, felt the universe narrow to this single point: a man in the doorway, snow melting in dark hair, eyes that had seen her and somehow not looked away. Linda cleared her throat from behind the counter, breaking the spell with the practiced efficiency of a woman who had watched too many moments like this turn into heartbreak. Somebody gonna take that man's order? Or are we all just gonna stand here staring? The spell broke. Emma laughed, nervous and real, a sound that came from somewhere below her ribs. Alex stepped forward, and the story that would break them and remake them began with the simplest of questions, the kind that launched 1,000 complicated endings. "Can I get a coffee?" "Black, no sugar." Emma reached for a cup with hands that trembled just slightly. The cup was warm from the dishwasher. She focused on that warmth, on the familiar motions of filling, of serving, of being professional. Coming right up. She poured the coffee with more care than the task required. Behind her, she could feel Linda's questions building, Rachel's protective concern gathering like weather. This man had found her, had sought her out. That meant something. The question was what, and whether Emma was brave enough or foolish enough to find out. Alex took the coffee and wrapped his hands around it, the same gesture she had drawn on the napkin the night before. Did he know she had watched him do exactly this? Did he realize she had been memorizing him even then? "Can we talk?" he asked quietly. Emma glanced at Linda, who made a small gesture. "Go. Break's in 5 minutes anyway. Take it now." They sat at the corner table, the one Emma usually claimed during her breaks because it had the best light. The winter sun slanted through the window, illuminating dust motes and the steam rising from his coffee. Emma folded her hands in her lap to keep them from shaking. "I need to be honest with you," Alex said, "about last night." Emma's stomach dropped. Here it came, the explanation, the reason this could not be what it felt like. She made herself hold his gaze. "My name isn't William Chen. I let you think I was, and I shouldn't have." "I know," Emma said. "Sophie found out this morning. The real Mr. Chen got picked up by your regular driver. So who are you really?" Alex met her eyes with something that looked like fear and hope tangled together. "Alexander Sterling. I run a foundation that funds arts education programs." The name landed like a stone. Sterling Foundation, the billboard, the gala for people who created. The world Emma had looked at from the outside and thought must be nice. "You're rich," she said. It was not a question. "I have money, yes. But, Emma, that's not why I'm here." "Then why are you here?" "Because last night, for the first time in longer than I can remember, someone saw me as a person. Not as a name or a bank account or a means to an end. You talked to me like I mattered beyond what I could do for you." and I have been thinking about that conversation for 12 hours straight. Emma felt something crack open in her chest, something dangerous and necessary. You lied to me. You watched me talk about being poor, about struggling, about my father dying because we couldn't afford care. You could have helped. You could have said who you were. And you didn't. No, I didn't, and I'm sorry. But Emma, if I had told you, would you have talked to me the way you did? Would you have told me the truth about your father? Or would you have performed, softened the edges, tried to make yourself palatable to the man with money? The question was unfair and also completely accurate. Emma knew the answer. She would have calculated every word, measured every gesture, turned herself into someone she thought he might help instead of someone she actually was. That doesn't make it right, she said quietly. No, it doesn't. Nothing about this is right, but it's real. And I would rather have real and wrong than perfect and fake. They sat in silence for a moment. Around them, the cafe continued its rhythm. Orders called, coffee poured. The city moving forward regardless of private revolutions at corner tables. I don't know what to do with this, Emma finally said. With you. I don't know how to be around someone who has everything I need but won't ask for. Then don't be around me because of what I have. Be around me because of who we are when we talk. And who is that? Two people who understand what it means to lose someone, who believe art matters more than money, who are tired of pretending all the time. Emma looked at him, really looked, past the expensive watch and the easy confidence, past the foundation and the power. She saw exhaustion that matched her own. She saw grief that had his sister's name carved into it. She saw someone trying, however imperfectly, to do something true. I need time to think about this. Fair enough. He stood, leaving money on the table. $20 for a $4 coffee. Emma's pride wanted to protest, but her rent envelope needed that $16 difference. Can I see you again? He asked. On your terms, whenever you're ready. Emma nodded slowly. Maybe. He smiled, small and genuine. Maybe is better than no. After he left, Rachel materialized beside her. Okay, explain. Now, Emma told her everything. The airport mistake, the conversation, the coffee, the lie, and the truth. Rachel listened without interrupting, her expression cycling through concern and excitement and worry. That man is dangerous. I know. Not because he's bad, because you're already halfway in love with him and you just met him last night. It's ridiculous. Is it? Because I've known you for 3 years and I have never seen you look at anyone the way you looked at him. Emma wanted to argue. Could not. Because Rachel was right. Something had happened in that car last night. Something that had nothing to do with money or foundations or fixing her broken life. Something that felt like recognition. Like finding someone who spoke a language she had thought only she knew. What do I do? Rachel squeezed her hand. The same thing we always do. Survive. But maybe, just this once, surviving looks like letting someone in. That night, Emma stood in her apartment surrounded by canvases and counted her money again. Rent envelope now held enough. Linda's 50, the stranger's 100, Alex's $16 tip. She could pay rent this month. The relief was physical, a loosening in her chest she had not realized was there. But beneath the relief was something else. A question that would not quiet. What did it mean that a stranger had seen her paintings without seeing them and still called them important? What did it mean that he had listened to her anger about her father's death and not tried to minimize it? What did it mean that she had drawn him from memory, and the drawing had felt necessary? Emma opened her sketchbook to the page from last night, The Stranger Who Saw Me. She studied the lines, the shadows, the expression she had captured. Then she turned the page and began drawing again. This time she drew two figures, one reaching toward the other across a space filled with snow. Neither touching yet, both leaning, both choosing. The title came to her fully formed, The Space Between Us. She did not know yet that this drawing would become a painting. Did not know that the painting would change everything. Did not know that the space between them would be filled with truth and lies and heartbreak and healing in equal measure. She knew only that she had been seen, and seeing, once experienced, became a hunger that could not be unfed. Across the city, Alexander Sterling stood in his penthouse and looked at the napkin she had drawn, coffee cup in hands. Such a simple thing to capture hope with. He thought about her face when she realized who he was, the anger and the hurt and the understanding beneath both. She had every right to walk away, but she had also given him something, an hour of being purely herself. No performance, no calculation, just Emma Hayes, painter and dreamer and daughter of a man the system had failed. And that Emma had marked him in ways he was only beginning to understand. His phone buzzed with messages, from Marcus, from board members, from Victoria. He ignored them all. For once, the mission could wait. Emma Hayes painted with hands that had known struggle, created beauty from pain, refused to let poverty erase her. She was exactly the kind of artist Lily would have become if she had lived. Alex made a decision. He would not rush this, would not try to fix Emma's life with money. He would simply show up, would prove through actions that he saw her, all of her. He would earn her trust the hard way, by being worthy of it. The sun rose over New York City, indifferent and beautiful. In Queens, Emma dressed for another day of serving coffee to people who did not see her. In Manhattan, Alex prepared for another day of running a foundation built on grief. Both of them carried the same secret knowledge. Something had changed, something that could not be unchanged. Neither of them knew about Victoria Ashford, sitting in her apartment with photographs of Alex and Emma spread across her table, trying to understand how she had lost him to someone so opposite from everything she represented. Neither of them knew about Robert Whitmore, scheduling a board meeting to discuss Alexander Sterling's recent erratic behavior and whether his personal life was compromising his professional judgment. They knew only this: the story had begun, and stories, once started, have a way of reaching their endings whether the characters are ready or not. Every time they met, she painted her truth, but he was painting a lie. And in art, as in love, the truth always shows through the layers. Wednesday morning arrived with the kind of cold that settled into bones and refused to leave. Emma woke to her alarm this time, the numbers glowing 5:30 in the pre-dawn darkness. The radiator clanked its familiar complaint, a sound she had learned to interpret like a language. 2 clanks meant it might work. 3 meant another freezing morning. She hit it twice with her shoe, the left sneaker that was coming apart at the sole, coaxing warmth from metal that had given up years ago on actually heating anything. Her body ached with the particular exhaustion of too little sleep and too many thoughts. The stranger from the airport, Alex, the man who had found her at the cafe, the man who was not who she thought he was. She dressed in the dark, saving the electricity that cost 12 cents per kilowatt hour, a number she knew because she had studied her utility bill, with the desperate attention of someone for whom every cent mattered. She pulled on yesterday's jeans and the same white blouse, now wrinkled but clean enough. Her coat hung by the door, the fabric thin and the lining torn. But it was December, and the choice between a new coat and rent was not really a choice at all. Emma counted her money again, a ritual that had become as necessary as breathing. The rent envelope now held $1,733, still short by $117, but closer than she had been yesterday, closer than she had been in months. The phone bill would auto-pay today, $67, that would leave her checking account with exactly $14.32 until Friday's paycheck. She did the calculation that poor women make every day, the invisible arithmetic that decides which need gets met and which gets deferred. Pay the phone bill and figure out rent somehow, or cancel the phone and lose the ability to be reached for shifts, for emergencies, for the small threads that kept her connected to the possibility of survival. The phone was her lifeline. Without it, Linda could not call when someone called in sick, and Emma could pick up an extra shift. Without it, the art center could not reach her about teaching hours. Without it, she was truly invisible, unreachable, erased from the grid of connection that made employment possible. She chose to pay the bill, chose to believe that somehow, in the next 2 days, she would find the missing $117. Faith was a luxury she could not afford, but she practiced it anyway because the alternative was despair, and despair did not pay rent either. The walk to the Painted Cup took 20 minutes through streets still dark and empty. Christmas lights blinked in windows, each one a small reminder of the season everyone else was preparing to celebrate. Emma had no money for gifts, no money for decorations, No money for the performance of joy that December demanded. She had only the daily effort of showing up and smiling and pouring coffee for people who did not see her. Linda Morrison was already at the cafe when Emma arrived at 6:15. The older woman looked up from the register with eyes that saw too much. Emma tried to arrange her face into something approaching normalcy, but Linda's expression shifted into the knowing concern of a woman who had survived her own struggles. "You okay, hun?" Emma wanted to lie, wanted to say she was fine, that everything was under control, that she had not spent most of the night thinking about a man whose last name she had just learned. But Linda's face held no judgment, only the patient kindness of someone who understood that sometimes the truth was all you had left to give. "I don't know," Emma admitted. "I met someone, and I don't know what to do about it." Linda poured 2 cups of coffee, strong and black, and gestured for Emma to sit. The cafe would not open for another 15 minutes. They had time for truth. "Tell me." So Emma told her about the airport pickup, about the hour in the hotel cafe, about Alex showing up yesterday and revealing his real identity, about the foundation and the money, and the way he had looked at her paintings without seeing them and still called them important. She told Linda about the fear that sat in her chest like a stone, the fear that she was not enough, that she would lose herself trying to be worthy of someone who already had everything. Linda listened without interrupting, the way older women do when they recognize the shape of a story they have lived themselves. When Emma finished, Linda reached across the table and took her hand. "Let me tell you something about men and money and love." Linda's voice was steady, certain in the way of hard-earned wisdom. "I met Maya's father when I was 32. He was a lawyer, successful, kind. I was a waitress with a GED and a mountain of debt from my mother's medical bills. I thought I wasn't good enough for him. Thought he would wake up one day and realize he could do better. What happened?" Linda smiled, sad and knowing. "I almost threw it away, pushed him away for months because I was so scared of being hurt. My mother finally sat me down and said something I've never forgotten. She said, 'Linda, you're not protecting yourself. You're punishing yourself for being poor. That's what they want, for us to eliminate ourselves so they don't have to.'" Emma felt the words land in her chest like recognition. "I married him anyway," Linda continued. "We had 20 good years before he died. Heart attack at 58. Had nothing to do with money or class or any of the things I worried about. But those 20 years, Em, they were the best of my life, and I almost didn't have them because I was too proud to accept that someone could see past my bank account to who I actually was." The cafe door chimed, the first morning customer, a regular who ordered the same thing every day and never looked at their faces. Linda stood and smoothed her apron. "I'm not saying trust every rich man who smiles at you," she said quietly. "I'm saying examine why you don't trust this one. Is it him, or is it you protecting yourself from hope?" The question stayed with Emma through the morning rush. She poured coffee and made lattes and smiled at customers who treated her like a machine that dispensed caffeine. Her hands moved through the familiar motions, while her mind worked the problem of Alexander Sterling. He had money and power and the ability to change her life with a phone call, but he had also listened when she talked about her father, had not tried to fix or minimize or explain away the injustice of a system that let good men die in waiting rooms. He had simply sat with her truth and let it exist. At 8 o'clock, Rachel Kim pushed through the door with the exhausted energy of a single mother who had already packed lunch, walked her son to school, and taken 2 buses to get to work. She tied her apron and immediately caught Emma's expression. "Okay, spill. What happened after Mystery Man showed up yesterday?" Emma glanced around the cafe. Only 2 customers, both absorbed in their phones. She pulled Rachel into the kitchen and told her everything in a rush of words. The truth about his identity, the foundation, the money, the way she felt like she was standing on the edge of something that could either save her or destroy her. Rachel listened with the fierce attention of a woman who had survived her own betrayals. When Emma finished, Rachel gripped her shoulders. Listen to me. That man is dangerous." "I know." "No, you don't." Rachel's voice was urgent, but not unkind. "He's not dangerous because he's bad. He's dangerous because you're already halfway in love with him, and you only met him 2 nights ago. I can see it in your face. The way you light up when you talk about him. The way you're scared and hopeful at the same time." Emma wanted to argue, Could not. Because Rachel was right. Something had shifted in her the moment Alex walked into the cafe yesterday. Something that had nothing to do with his money or his foundation or his ability to help her. Something that felt like recognition. Like finding someone who spoke a language she thought only she knew. What do I do? Rachel's expression softened. The same thing we always do. Survive. But maybe, just this once, surviving looks like letting someone in. The lunch rush blurred into the familiar rhythm of orders and small talk. Emma moved through it automatically, her body performing the motions while her mind replayed every conversation with Alex. The way he had said art matters. The way he had held her napkin drawing like it was precious. The way he had admitted his own loneliness without making it her responsibility to fix. At 2:30, her phone buzzed. A text from Sophie. Call me. Emergency. Emma's stomach dropped. She stepped into the back room and called her cousin. What's wrong? Sophie's voice came through tight with stress. My boss found out about the mix-up, about you picking up the wrong person. He wants to know who the mystery client was and why he didn't complain about the service failure. Did you tell him? What am I supposed to tell him? That my cousin accidentally picked up some guy who was nice enough not to report us? I could lose my job over this. Guilt twisted in Emma's chest. This was her fault, her mistake. Sophie had asked for one favor, and Emma had somehow turned it into a crisis. I'm sorry, God, Sophie, I'm so sorry. It's not your fault. Sophie sighed. Just tell me his last name so I can at least give my boss something. Sterling, Alexander Sterling. The silence on the other end stretched long enough that Emma checked to see if the call had dropped. Sophie? Emma. Her cousin's voice had gone strange. Do you know who that is? He runs some foundation, he told me yesterday. Some foundation. Sophie laughed, high and disbelieving. He runs Sterling Foundation. It's one of the biggest arts nonprofits on the East Coast. $200 million endowment. He's been profiled in Forbes. His father was Jonathan Sterling, the real estate developer. Alex is worth like $300 million personally. The numbers were too big to process. Emma sat down on a stack of coffee bean boxes, her legs suddenly unsteady. Are you still there? Sophie asked. I'm here, Emma struggled for words. I didn't know. Clearly he didn't want you to know. The question is why. Emma thought about the tired look in his eyes when he talked about his sister. The way he had said everyone sees the money first. Me, never. The way he had asked for her coffee napkin sketch like it mattered more than anything money could buy. I think he wanted to be seen as a person, Emma said quietly, not as a bank account. Sophie made a considering sound. That's either really sweet or really manipulative. I'm not sure which. The rest of her shift passed in a blur of anxiety and confusion. Emma served coffee and wiped tables and counted her tips. $38. Not enough to make up the shortfall on rent. Never enough. The mathematics of poverty had no room for romantic complications. That evening, Emma walked home instead of taking the subway, saving $2.75 and using the time to think. The cold air bit at her face, but she barely felt it. Her mind was too crowded with questions. Why had Alex come to her cafe? What did he want from her? Was this some kind of game rich people played, slumming with the poor to feel better about themselves? But she remembered the way he had looked at her when she showed him her imaginary paintings. The way he had said you didn't embarrass yourself. The way his voice had gone soft when he talked about his sister. That had not felt like a game. That had felt like grief, recognizing grief. Her phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. This is Alex. Marcus got your number from your cousin's company. I hope that's okay. I wanted to say I'm sorry for not being more honest from the start. Can we talk? Emma stared at the message for a full minute. Her thumb hovered over the keyboard. She could ignore it, could delete his number and go back to her small, safe life of coffee and bills and canvases that no one would ever see. Or she could take the risk. Could choose to believe that maybe, just maybe, someone actually saw her. She typed back, Saturday, 2 p.m., Riverside Park. I'll bring my paintings. His response came immediately. I'll be there. Thank you. Emma shoved her phone in her pocket and walked faster, as if she could outrun the feeling rising in her chest. Hope was a dangerous thing for poor people. Hope made you vulnerable, made you forget that the world was designed to disappoint you. But she had it anyway, burning small and stubborn beneath her ribs. Saturday arrived cold and bright, the kind of winter day that made the city look clean and new under a sky so blue it hurt to look at directly. Emma woke early, before the alarm. her body tense with anticipation and fear in equal measure. She spent an hour choosing which paintings to bring, pulling canvases from against the wall, and studying each one with the critical eye of someone who knew this mattered. This was not just showing art, this was showing her soul made visible. This was asking to be seen and risking being found wanting. She settled on 3 small canvases, each one a piece of truth she had not known how to speak aloud. Waiting room, the hospital where her father died. The fluorescent lights harsh and unforgiving. The empty chairs arranged like an audience for tragedy. The clock showing 2 a.m. because grief kept its own time, indifferent to visiting hours or work schedules or the needs of the living. The last lesson. Her father's hands teaching her young hands to hold a brush. The composition simple, but the emotion complex, layered with everything she wished she had said before it was too late. Invisible, the self-portrait of a woman no one saw, standing still on a city street while crowds walked through her like she was made of air. Her features blurred except for her eyes, which burned with the defiance of someone refusing to disappear, even when the world demanded it. She packed them carefully in an old portfolio case her father had given her for her 16th birthday. The leather cracked and the zipper temperamental, but carrying them in anything else would feel like betrayal. She took the subway to Riverside Park, the 20-minute ride giving her too much time to second-guess every decision that had led to this moment. What was she doing? Showing her amateur paintings to a man who probably knew real artists, famous artists, people whose work hung in museums and sold for prices that could pay her rent for years. He would be kind about it. Rich people were always kind when they pitied you, their sympathy a performance of grace that cost them nothing. That might be worse than rejection. Pity was rejection with a smile. But when she arrived at their meeting spot, a bench near the river with a view of the bridge, stretching across water that looked black in the winter cold, Alex was already there. He stood when he saw her, unfolding from the bench with a quickness that suggested he had been watching for her arrival. The expression on his face was nervous. Actually nervous. Not the polished confidence of a CEO or the practiced ease of someone accustomed to getting what they wanted. Just genuine nerves, the kind that came from caring about an outcome you could not control. Like this mattered to him. Like she mattered. "Hi," he said. "Hi." They stood 3 feet apart, neither moving closer. The distance between them felt important. Emma set her portfolio down and took a breath. "I need to ask you something before I show you these. Anything. Why did you come to the cafe? Why find me?" Alex looked out at the river for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was quiet but certain. "Because when I'm with you, I don't have to perform. I don't have to be the foundation CEO or the dead girl's brother or the disappointing ex-fiancé. I can just be someone who drinks coffee and talks about art. And I haven't felt that way in 5 years." The honesty of it landed in Emma's chest like a physical thing. "Your turn," Alex said. "Why did you agree to meet me today?" "Because you listened when I told you about my father." Emma's voice steadied. "You didn't try to make it less awful or tell me everything happens for a reason. You just sat with the truth of it. And nobody does that." They looked at each other across the small distance. Something passed between them, an understanding that went deeper than words. "Can I see your work now?" Alex asked. Emma unzipped the portfolio with hands that trembled slightly. She pulled out the first canvas and held it up. Waiting room, the fluorescent lights harsh against the empty chairs, the clock showing 2 a.m., the suggestion of a figure slumped in the corner. Alex stared at it without speaking. Emma counted her heartbeats. 1, 2, 3, 4. At 15, he finally moved closer. "This is where he died?" Emma nodded, not trusting her voice. "It's beautiful," Alex said. "Not the subject. The way you painted it. The loneliness. The waiting. The way that clock is the only thing in focus. Like time became the enemy." "Yes." Emma felt something release in her chest. "That's exactly it." She showed him the second painting. The last lesson. 2 pairs of hands. One weathered and large. One small and uncertain. Both holding the same brush. The composition simple, but the emotion complex. "Your father taught you?" "Everything," Emma said. "Not just how to paint, how to see, how to find beauty even when everything is ugly, how to make something that proves you existed." Alex studied the painting with an intensity that made Emma feel exposed and seen in equal measure. "My sister wanted to paint," he said quietly. "She was 15 when she started having panic attacks, depression. She begged our parents for art therapy. They thought she was being dramatic. By the time they realized she was serious, it was too late. She died at 16. The grief in his voice was old and deep, the kind that never fully heals. "I'm sorry," Emma said. "Sterling Foundation exists because of her. Because I failed her. Because if someone had just listened when she said art could save her, maybe she'd still be here." They stood in silence for a moment, two people bound by the particular pain of losing someone to a system that did not care. Emma showed him the third painting, Invisible. The city street crowded with people, the woman standing still while everyone walked through her like she was made of air. The colors muted except for her eyes, which burned with the defiance of someone refusing to disappear. "This is how I feel most days," Emma said, "like I'm screaming and no one hears me." Alex looked at her instead of the painting. "I hear you." The words were simple, but they landed like a promise. They sat on the bench, the paintings propped against the portfolio between them. The winter sun angled through bare trees, casting shadows on the frozen ground. Emma felt the cold through her coat, but did not suggest they leave. This moment felt important, fragile, like something that could shatter if they moved too quickly. "Can I be honest with you about something?" Alex asked. Emma braced herself. "Please. When I first saw your paintings, before I even met you, I knew you were the kind of artist Sterling Foundation was meant to support. The kind with real talent who gets overlooked because you don't have an MFA or connections or a trust fund. I could fund your work tomorrow, give you a studio, supplies, as a stipend to live on while you create. But I don't want you to think that's why I'm here." "Then why are you here?" "'Cause when you talk, I feel less alone. And I think maybe you feel the same way." Emma looked at him, really looked. Past the expensive watch and the easy confidence that came from never worrying about rent. She saw exhaustion that matched her own. She saw someone trying, however imperfectly, to do something true in a world that rewarded performance. "I do," she admitted, "feel less alone. So what do we do about that?" Emma thought about Linda's story, about the 20 years she almost did not have because pride got in the way of love. She thought about her father, who had died believing art mattered more than money. She thought about her own paintings, the way she poured truth onto canvas because lying hurt worse than poverty. "We figure it out," she said. "Slowly, honestly, without you trying to fix my life with money, and without me pretending your money doesn't exist." Alex smiled, tentative and real. "I can work with that." They walked along the river path as the afternoon light began to fade. They talked about art and grief and the strange loneliness of being seen only for what you could provide. Emma told him about Rachel's son who needed glasses, and Linda's daughter who needed college tuition, and the invisible web of women holding each other up because no one else would. Alex told her about board meetings, where men argued about which arts programs were worth funding, while never asking the artists themselves. About Victoria, his ex-fiancée, who had wanted him to give up the foundation for something more profitable. About the weight of trying to honor his sister, while building something that actually helped instead of just looking good on paper. By the time they circled back to the bench where her paintings waited, the sun was setting behind the buildings, painting the sky in shades of orange and gold. Emma gathered her canvases, sliding them carefully back into the portfolio. "Can I see you again?" Alex asked. Emma thought about all the reasons to say no. The class difference, the power imbalance, the fear of losing herself to someone else's gravity. But she thought about Linda's words too. "You're not protecting yourself. You're punishing yourself for being poor." "Yes," she said. "But Alex, I need you to understand something. I'm not a project. I'm not someone for you to save or fix or feel good about helping. If we do this, whatever this is, I need to be your equal, not your charity case. I would never think of you that way. Maybe not. But the world will. And I need to know you can handle that. That you won't get tired of defending me or explaining me or justifying why someone like you is with someone like me." Alex reached for her hand, then stopped, letting his hand fall. The restraint felt more intimate than touching. "Emma, I've spent 5 years being someone I'm not. performing for boards and donors and reporters who want me to fit a certain image. You're the first person who's asked me to be real. That's not charity. That's a gift. And if the world has a problem with that, the world can go to hell. Emma felt something warm uncurl in her chest. Okay, she said, okay. Sunday morning found Emma at Linda's house for the painting lesson with Maya. Linda's daughter was 18, sharp and ambitious, applying to art schools with portfolio requirements Emma understood too well. They worked for 3 hours in the small dining room, Emma teaching Maya techniques for showing depth and emotion, Maya absorbing every word with the hunger of someone who knew education was the only way out. Halfway through, Linda appeared with tea and sandwiches. She sat and watched them work, her expression soft with something Emma eventually recognized as hope. You're good at this, Linda said when Maya took a break. Teaching, I mean. You make it feel possible. It is possible, Emma said, just harder than it should be. After the lesson ended and Maya left to meet friends, Linda poured more tea and fixed Emma with a knowing look. So, the rich man, you seeing him again? Emma felt her face warm. Maybe. Linda smiled. Be careful with your heart, honey, but don't be so careful you miss the chance to use it. That evening, Emma painted. Not the pieces for galleries or sale, just for herself. She painted Alex sitting on the bench holding coffee, looking not like a millionaire, but like a man searching for something real. She painted the space between them, the distance that felt both necessary and painful. She painted the possibility of bridges built from truth instead of money. She did not know she was falling in love. Or maybe she did, and was too scared to name it. Monday morning brought rain, cold and relentless. Emma walked to work with her hood up and her head down, already exhausted before the day began. The cafe was nearly empty when she arrived, just one regular reading the newspaper in the corner. Linda was counting the register with the tired efficiency of someone working on 4 hours of sleep. Slow morning, Linda observed. You okay to handle it alone for an hour? I need to run to the bank. Of course. Linda grabbed her coat and umbrella, then paused at the door. Oh, and Em, there's someone here to see you, said she'd wait. Emma looked around the empty cafe confused. Who? Linda's expression went carefully neutral. She said her name is Victoria Ashford. The name meant nothing to Emma. She shrugged and Linda left, the bell over the door chiming in the quiet. Emma turned back to the espresso machine, checking the milk and wiping down surfaces. When she looked up again, there was a woman standing at the counter. She was stunning in the way of people who have never worried about money. Mid-30s, dark hair perfectly styled, wearing a coat that probably cost more than Emma's rent. Designer bag, subtle jewelry that somehow screamed expensive. She ordered an oat milk latte with the kind of confidence that came from always getting what you wanted. Emma made the drink carefully, aware of being watched and judged. She handed it across the counter with a professional smile. Thank you, the woman said. You're Emma Hayes? Yes. The woman sat at a table by the window and opened her laptop. She worked for an hour, occasionally looking up to observe Emma with an intensity that felt invasive. When the morning rush trickled in, the woman stayed, nursing her latte and watching. Finally, during a lull, she approached the counter again. I'm Victoria Ashford, she said. I used to be engaged to Alex Sterling. The words landed like a punch. Emma felt her face do something she could not control. Victoria smiled, not unkindly, but not warmly either. He hasn't mentioned me? That's typical. What do you want? Emma's voice came out steadier than she felt. To see for myself, the latest project. Emma felt anger spike hot and immediate. I'm not a project. Victoria's expression shifted into something complex. Pity and recognition and bitterness tangled together. That's what I thought too, she said quietly. Can I tell you a story? Emma wanted to say no, wanted to ask this woman to leave, but something in Victoria's voice stopped her. This was not the attack Emma had braced for. This was something else. I was an artist once, Victoria began, her voice taking on the quality of someone reciting a eulogy for a life that should have been. Sculptor. I worked in clay and bronze, creating pieces about the female body and aging, and all the things we're not supposed to talk about. I got into Pratt on full scholarship, first person in my family to go to college. I was good, really good. My professor said I had a future. Junior year, I had a piece in a group show at a gallery in Chelsea. Not a big gallery, just a small space in a basement, but it felt huge to me. My work was being seen. That night, I met Alex's father at the opening. Jonathan Sterling, real estate developer, collector, man who could change lives with a checkbook. He looked at my sculpture for maybe 30 seconds and offered me an internship at Sterling Holdings, $40,000 a year, health insurance, a path out of the poverty I'd grown up in. Victoria paused, looking down at her perfect manicure, nails painted a soft pink that probably cost more than Emma's groceries for a week. I took it. Of course I took it. You would have too. Anyone who's ever been poor would have. Real money for the first time in my life. Security. The ability to help my mother, who was cleaning houses at 60 years old because retirement was a fantasy for people like us. I told myself it was temporary, that I'd keep sculpting on weekends and evenings, that having money would make my art better, freer, less desperate. She laughed, a sound empty of humor. Then I met Alex. I fell in love. Hard. The kind of love that makes you stupid, that makes you forget who you were before. He was grieving his sister, drowning in guilt, trying to build something meaningful out of tragedy. He asked me to quit the corporate job, help him launch the foundation. Said we'd change the world together, that my artistic perspective was exactly what the foundation needed. I said yes. We were engaged for 2 years. Perfect couple on paper. The visionary CEO and his cultured artistic fiancé who understood the mission. What happened? Emma asked, though she could already guess the shape of the story. Victoria turned back to face her, and Emma saw something raw in her expression, something that looked like recognition. I stopped sculpting. Didn't even notice it first. I was busy planning galas, managing donors, being the perfect partner for a CEO who was changing the world. My studio became a storage room. My tools collected dust. Then one day, 3 years into our engagement, I woke up and realized I hadn't touched clay in 5 years. My art was gone. My identity was Alex Sterling's fiancée, the woman who organized beautiful events where other artists got celebrated while my own hands forgot how to create. So I asked him to choose, me as a partner with my own dreams and identity, or the foundation as his whole life, with me as just another accessory to his mission. He chose the foundation, Emma said quietly, though it was not quite a question. No. Victoria's correction was sharp. That's what I tell people, but it's not true. He asked me to choose. My art or the security of staying with him, my identity or the life we'd built together. And I chose wrong, Emma. I chose to stay. I chose the money and the status and the fear that I'd never find anyone else who would love me. I gave up sculpting completely, became a professional event planner. Very successful. Very miserable. We stayed engaged another year before I finally had the courage to leave. And by then, it was too late. My hands had forgotten. My vision had dimmed. I was 32 years old and my art was dead, and I had killed it for a man who didn't even ask me to. The honesty was unexpected. Emma found herself sitting down across from Victoria without meaning to. I don't know if he's serious about you, Victoria continued. But if he is, understand this. Alex Sterling will always choose his mission over everything else. It's how he deals with grief. Work and purpose instead of feeling. You'll give up your art, your identity, yourself, and call it love. Don't be me, Emma. Choose yourself first. Victoria stood, leaving her card on the table. If you ever want to talk, really talk, call me. Woman to woman. Not competing for a man, just surviving the same world that eats women like us. She left before Emma could respond. The card sat on the table like a warning. Victoria Ashford, event director. A phone number in elegant script. Emma picked up the card slowly. She thought about Victoria's eyes when she talked about sculpture, the grief of a dream given up, the bitterness of a choice that could not be unmade. She thought about her own paintings stacked in her apartment, about the fear that loving Alex meant losing herself. That night, Emma could not sleep. She lay in bed staring at the ceiling, watching headlights from passing cars sweep across the cracked plaster like searchlights hunting for something lost. She thought about Victoria's eyes when she talked about sculpture, the way grief and regret had carved themselves into her perfect face, the bitterness of a choice that could not be unmade, the slow death of a dream given up piece by piece until nothing remained but the memory of what could have been. Emma stood and walked to her makeshift studio, the corner of her apartment where canvases leaned against walls and brushes stood in jars like flowers that never died. She pulled out a fresh canvas, larger than she usually worked with, and began to paint without planning, letting her hands move faster than her thoughts could censor. The piece that emerged was dark, visceral, honest, in a way that frightened her. A woman dissolving into golden fog, her features blurring, her edges bleeding into nothingness. But the eyes remained clear, burning with something between rage and surrender. She worked for hours, adding layers, building depth, painting the fear she could not speak aloud. The fear that loving Alex meant losing herself, that being seen by someone with power meant slowly disappearing until only his vision of her remained. That Victoria's warning was not jealousy, but prophecy. She titled it Swallowed. It was the most honest thing she had painted in months, and the most terrifying, because it revealed what she had been trying to hide even from herself. She was not just afraid of being hurt, she was afraid of being erased, of becoming another version of Victoria, waking up 5 years from now to discover that Emma the artist had died quietly, while Emma the girlfriend lived on, smaller and safer and utterly lost. The painting stared back at her, challenging, accusing, asking the question she did not want to answer. What are you willing to give up for love? What pieces of yourself are negotiable? Where is the line between compromise and surrender? Emma did not know. She was 26 years old, and she had already survived more loss than some people experienced in a lifetime. Her father, her dreams of art school, the security of knowing where next month's rent would come from. She had learned to live with absence, but could she live with presence? Could she let someone close without losing the borders that made her herself? At midnight, her phone buzzed, loud in the silence of her apartment. Alex, I know it's late, but I can't stop thinking about what you said. About being equals. I want that too. I need you to know I'm not trying to save you or fix you. I just want to know you. Can we talk tomorrow? Emma stared at the message for a long time, her thumb hovering over the keyboard. She looked at her painting, the woman dissolving into gold. Then she looked at her other paintings, the ones that lined her walls like prayers. Waiting Room, The Last Lesson, City of Strangers, Invisible. Every one of them a fight against erasure. Every one of them proof that she existed, that she mattered, that poverty and loss and grief had not succeeded in making her disappear. Maybe that was the answer. Not choosing between love and self, but choosing to fight for both. To be vulnerable without becoming invisible. To let someone in without giving everything away. To love without losing the borders that made loving possible in the first place. She picked up her brush and added something new to the painting. A hand reaching back out of the fog. Still dissolving but also fighting. Still losing herself but also refusing to go quietly. The hand was small, uncertain, but it was there. Reaching, choosing, refusing the narrative that said she had to choose between being loved and being whole. Emma set down her brush and picked up her phone. She texted back, "Yes, tomorrow. But Alex, I need you to understand something. I'm terrified. Not of you. Of disappearing, of waking up one day and not recognizing myself. Of becoming someone's project or muse or charity case instead of staying myself. Can you live with that fear? Can you love someone who needs to keep her edges even when they're sharp?" The response came quickly, as if he had been waiting, holding his phone, hoping. "I'm terrified too, of failing you the way I failed my sister. Of having all this money and power and still being helpless to protect someone I care about. Of wanting to help and knowing that helping might be the exact wrong thing to do. So yes, I can live with your fear. Maybe we can be terrified together and figure out how to trust anyway." Emma felt something crack open in her chest, something that had been holding very still and very tight for a very long time. Thank you for that, for being honest about being scared. That's all I know how to be with you, honest. Even when it makes me sound like I have no idea what I'm doing. Good, because I have no idea either. We can be lost together. The conversation continued into the early hours, texts trading back and forth, Neither of them saying goodnight because ending the conversation felt like losing something they had just found. They talked about small things, favorite books, worst jobs, the specific way rain sounded against different kinds of windows. They talked about fear and hope and the strange mathematics of risk that said sometimes the safest choice was also the most dangerous, that protection could be its own kind of prison. Finally, at 2 in the morning, Alex wrote, "I should let you sleep, but I'm glad we talked. Glad you're giving this a chance. Giving me a chance." I'm glad too, scared but glad. The best things are always both. Emma set her phone down and looked at her painting one more time, the hand reaching out of the fog. She thought about Linda's 20 years of happiness, bought with the courage to risk being hurt. She thought about Rachel's loneliness, the price of walls built too high. She thought about her father's last words. "Promise me you'll keep painting. Promise me you won't let the system tell you your art doesn't matter." He had not said, "Promise me you'll be safe." He had not said, "Promise me you'll protect yourself." He had said, "Keep painting, keep creating, keep making something that proves you existed." And maybe, just maybe, love was part of that. Maybe letting someone see you, really see you, was its own kind of art, terrifying and necessary and worth the risk of being destroyed. Emma cleaned her brushes and put them away. She turned off the lights and got into bed. Outside, the city continued its nighttime symphony of sirens and car horns and distant music. Inside, Emma closed her eyes and made a choice. She would let Alex in. She would risk her heart. She would trust that maybe, just maybe, someone could see her fully and not look away. And if she was wrong, if Victoria's warning proved true, then at least she would have tried. At least she would have reached back out of the fog. At least she would have fought for the possibility of being both artist and beloved, both creator and created, both whole and held. It would not be easy. Nothing worth doing ever was. But Emma Hayes had survived her father's death and poverty, and the daily humiliation of invisibility. She could survive being seen. She could survive being loved, even if it cost her everything, even if the price was her heart. The rain continued outside, washing the streets clean. Inside her small apartment, surrounded by paintings that proved she existed, Emma made a choice. She would let Alex in. She would risk her heart. She would trust that maybe, just maybe, someone could see her fully and not look away. And if she was wrong, if Victoria's warning proved true, then at least she would have tried. At least she would have reached back out of the fog. At least she would have fought for the possibility of being both artist and beloved, both creator and created, both whole and held. The city slept around her. Emma painted through the night. And somewhere across town, Alex stood at his window and wondered if he was brave enough to deserve her. If he could be the man who saw her and stayed. If he could prove that love was not about fixing or saving or owning, but about witnessing. About standing beside someone and saying, "I see you, and I'm not afraid." They did not know yet that Victoria's warning was both true and incomplete, that choosing yourself did not mean choosing loneliness, that love, real love, demanded you become more yourself, not less, that the space between them was not an obstacle, but a bridge being built one honest moment at a time. They knew only this: the story was not over, the paintings were not finished. And tomorrow, they would try again. They would show up and tell the truth and hope it was enough. Because what else could they do? What else did any of us ever do but try? The night that should have been her triumph became the night she lost everything and learned the cruelest lesson about love and power. 2 weeks passed in a strange new rhythm, a cadence Emma had never experienced before. She worked her shifts at the Painted Cup, counted her money with the same anxious precision that poverty demanded, painted late into the night while the city slept around her like a beast that never quite settled. But something had shifted in the texture of her days, some fundamental alteration in the way light fell through windows and coffee tasted and silence felt. Alex appeared at the cafe 3 times a week, always in the afternoon lull between lunch rush and dinner prep, always ordering black coffee, always sitting at the corner table where the light fell just right through the streaked window. They talked about art and grief and the small moments that made life bearable when everything else felt designed to break you. He never mentioned his foundation or his money or the power he had to change lives with phone calls. She never asked for help or hinted at needs or performed the careful dance of a woman hoping to be saved. They existed in a careful space between their two worlds, neither quite ready to bridge the gap entirely, both acutely aware that the bridge, when built, might collapse under the weight of what they carried. The rent got paid on Friday. Emma never asked how the missing $117 appeared in her envelope, folded small and tucked beneath her door one Thursday morning before dawn. The bills were new and crisp, not like the worn money she usually handled, and they smelled faintly of ink and possibility. Linda smiled when Emma tried to return them the next day and said some gifts were meant to be accepted without questions. That pride was well and good, but stubbornness in the face of help was just another form of self-harm. Emma had taken the money back and paid her rent, and felt simultaneously grateful and ashamed, the two emotions tangling until she could not separate gratitude from the fear that she was becoming exactly what Victoria had warned against. Rachel's son got his glasses 3 days later. The frames were blue and slightly too big for his small face, and when Tyler put them on and could suddenly see the individual leaves on trees and the expressions on people's faces from more than 5 feet away, he cried with the overwhelmed joy of a child experiencing a miracle. Rachel cried too, standing in the optometrist's office and not caring who saw. That night she told Emma that the bill had been mysteriously covered by the Children's Vision Charity Fund, a program she had never heard of until the receptionist mentioned it. Emma suspected Alex had made a quiet phone call to someone who knew someone, had moved pieces on a board she could not see, had helped without needing credit or gratitude. She did not know whether to be moved by his discretion or angry at his presumption. Settled finally on both. These small mercies arrived without announcement, without strings, without the performance of charity that would have made them unbearable. A box of professional-grade art supplies appeared on Emma's doorstep with no return address. Linda's hours at the cafe mysteriously increased, which meant Emma's did too, which meant more money without the humiliation of handouts. The art center where Emma taught part-time suddenly had funding to pay teachers $20 an hour instead of $15. Each gift was deniable, explainable as coincidence or good fortune, or the natural way the world sometimes tilted in your favor. But Emma knew. She knew the shape of Alex's help the way you know someone's handwriting, the particular way his care manifested in solutions that preserved her dignity while addressing her needs. She did not know how to feel about it. Gratitude and resentment warred in her chest every time another small miracle appeared. He was respecting her boundaries by not making the help obvious, but he was also circumventing her autonomy by helping without her consent. She had told him she needed to earn things herself, and he had listened and then quietly arranged for her to have more opportunities to earn. Was that respect or manipulation? Support or control? Emma painted her confusion onto canvas after canvas, trying to work out the answer in brushstrokes and color choices. But the paintings offered no clarity, only more questions. Emma painted more in those 2 weeks than she had in 6 months. The canvases multiplied against her walls like evidence of an obsession, each one a conversation she was having with herself about risk and trust, and the possibility of being seen without being consumed. She painted Alex sitting on the park bench, his expression caught between hope and fear, the winter light making him look both older and younger than his 34 years. She painted her own hands holding a brush, the knuckles rough from work and cold, but still capable of creation, still able to make something beautiful from pain. She painted the space between two people reaching toward each other, across a distance measured not in feet, but in the accumulated weight of different lives, different choices, different worlds that had never been meant to intersect. She painted what she could not say, that she was falling in love with him despite every instinct telling her to protect herself, that his kindness terrified her more than his money ever could, because kindness required trust, and trust required vulnerability, and vulnerability was how you got destroyed, that she wanted to believe in the possibility of them. But Victoria's warning echoed every time she let herself hope. Choose yourself first. The words had become a mantra and a curse, a reminder that self-preservation sometimes looked like self-sabotage, that protecting yourself from pain sometimes meant protecting yourself from everything else too. On a Wednesday morning that arrived gray and threatening snow, James Morrison called her. His voice carried the careful enthusiasm of someone delivering good news they were not entirely sure would be received as such. "Emma, I have a proposal for you. Harbor Arts Collective is doing a showcase next month. Emerging local artists. I'd like to feature 3 of your pieces." Emma's hand tightened on her phone. A real gallery show, not some coffee shop display or community center exhibition. An actual showcase where critics and collectors and people who understood art would see her work and judge it against professional standards. "I can't afford the portfolio fee," she said quietly, hating the words even as she spoke them. "There is no fee. This is invitation only. Your work speaks for itself." Emma closed her eyes, feeling something crack in her chest. The dream she had stopped letting herself dream was suddenly, impossibly within reach. "When?" 4 weeks. February 10th. Opening reception is that Saturday at 7. I'll need the pieces by the 1st for installation and lighting. They talked logistics for 10 more minutes. Emma hung up and stood in her apartment, surrounded by her paintings, and allowed herself one moment of pure, uncomplicated joy. Then she called Alex because she wanted to share this with someone who would understand what it meant. Not the money or the opportunity, the validation, the proof that her work mattered to someone beyond herself. He answered on the first ring. "I got a gallery show," she said, and her voice broke on the words. "Emma, that's incredible. When?" "February 10th. Harbor Arts Collective. James Morrison is curating." The pause on the other end was long enough that Emma checked to see if the call had dropped. "Alex?" His voice when he spoke was careful, controlled in a way that made her nervous. "That's wonderful news. You deserve this. Your work deserves this." "But?" "No buts. I'm proud of you." Something in his tone did not match his words, but Emma let it go. She had a gallery show. 4 weeks to prepare. 4 weeks to choose which pieces to display. Which parts of her soul to offer up for judgment. The fear and the excitement tangled together until she could not separate one from the other. The next 3 weeks blurred into a fever of preparation. Emma painted, chose, rejected, chose again. She settled finally on the 3 pieces she had shown Alex in the park. Waiting Room, The Last Lesson, Invisible, each one a truth she had learned to live with, but had never quite made peace with. The truth that the system killed people like her father. The truth that love was something you learned from someone who would not stay. The truth that poverty made you disappear while you were still breathing. Alex came to her apartment the night before the show. It was the first time he had been in her space, and she watched his face as he took in the small room, the canvases everywhere, the carefully organized poverty of someone who had learned to make much from little. He did not comment on the size of the place, or the crack in the window, or the radiator that only worked when you hit it. He simply looked at her paintings, really looked, with the attention she had come to recognize as one of his defining qualities, the ability to see what mattered. "These are extraordinary," he said finally. "They're honest. That's what makes them extraordinary." He turned to face her. "Emma, I need to tell you something about tomorrow night." She braced herself. Here it came. Whatever he had been holding back. Harbor Arts Collective received a significant donation 6 months ago. Anonymous donor. The money went to support emerging artists, including funding the showcase. "You," Emma said. "It was you." Alex's expression was pained. "I wanted you to have opportunities without having to ask, without feeling like you owed me. But I also don't want you walking into that gallery tomorrow thinking you got there on merit, when part of the funding came from me." Emma sat down on her bed because her legs suddenly felt unreliable. Part of her wanted to be angry. Part of her was angry. But a larger part understood the impossible position they were both in. How did you love someone who had the power to change your life with money, when accepting that help felt like losing yourself? "Did James know?" "No. The donation was anonymous. I didn't tell him to feature you. He chose your work on its own. But you made it possible. I made the showcase possible. Your talent made your inclusion possible. There's a difference." "Is there?" Alex sat beside her, careful to maintain distance. "I don't know. I'm trying to figure out how to support someone I care about without that support becoming control. I'm trying to figure out how to use resources I have without making you feel like a project. I'm failing at it. I know I'm failing, but I'm trying. Emma looked at her paintings, at the proof of her existence made visible, at the work that was hers and hers alone, regardless of who paid the electric bill in the gallery where it would hang. "Thank you for telling me," she said finally. "Thank you for not letting me walk in there thinking it was pure luck. It's not luck, it's talent. The money just opened a door. You're the one who has to walk through it." They sat in silence for a moment, the weight of unsaid things hanging between them. "Will you be there tomorrow?" Emma asked. "Do you want me to be?" "Yes. Even though I'm terrified and I don't know what this means for us and I'm still angry you didn't tell me sooner." "Yes." "Then I'll be there." He left an hour later, and Emma spent the night painting one more piece, not for the show, just for herself. Two figures reaching toward each other across a space filled with gold coins, the money falling away as their hands came closer. Neither of them quite touching yet, neither of them looking away. Saturday arrived cold and clear. Emma woke with her stomach in knots. She had exactly one outfit appropriate for a gallery opening, the navy dress she had bought for Sophie's graduation 3 years ago. She ironed it carefully, pinned her hair back, put on the minimal makeup that was all she could afford. Looking at herself in the mirror, she saw someone playing dress up, someone pretending to belong in a world designed for people with safety nets and trust funds. Rachel and Sophie arrived at 6 to help her get ready. They fussed over her hair and makeup, told her she looked beautiful, reminded her that she had earned this. Linda had given her the evening off from the cafe and slipped another $50 in her hand that morning with instructions to take a cab to the gallery instead of the subway. Emma had cried, and Linda had held her and said nothing because sometimes the kindness was in the silence. The cab dropped her at Harbor Arts Collective at 6:45. The gallery glowed with warm light spilling onto the sidewalk, already filling with people in expensive clothes, holding wine glasses, and talking in the hushed tones people used around art, as if beauty demanded reverence, or at least the performance of it. Emma stepped out of the cab into air so cold it burned her lungs, and for a moment she could not move, could not make her feet carry her toward the door, could not make herself step into that world of people who belonged when she had spent her entire life learning the 1,000 ways she did not. She thought about turning around, getting back in the cab, going home to her apartment and her canvases and the safety of invisibility. But Rachel and Sophie were already inside, having arrived early to claim good spots, and Linda had given her the night off with explicit instructions not to waste it. And her paintings were in there, hung on walls, lit by professional lighting, seen by people who knew the difference between amateur and artist. She could not walk away from that, from the proof that her work mattered beyond the confines of her own small apartment. Emma stepped inside and felt immediately, viscerally, like an imposter. Like someone who had stolen clothes from a real person and was trying to pass in a world where everyone could see the theft. The gallery was beautiful in a way that made her chest ache. Polished concrete floors, white walls that seemed to glow, track lighting that made each painting look like it contained its own source of illumination. And the people. God, the people. Women in dresses that cost more than Emma made in a month. Men in tailored suits with watches that could pay her rent for a year. They moved through the space with the easy confidence of people who had never worried about money, never calculated the cost of every choice, never stood in a grocery store, and decided which meals to skip so they could afford art supplies. Everyone here belonged. Everyone here knew the right things to say, the right way to stand, the right amount of interest to show without seeming desperate or eager, or any of the things Emma felt pulsing through her veins. She was a woman from Astoria, who served coffee and counted pennies and painted in a freezing apartment, because making art was the only thing that made survival feel like more than just not dying. What was she doing here? What had made her think she deserved to stand in this space alongside people who had studied at real schools, and had real careers, and had never once wondered if they could afford both dinner and paint? James Morrison appeared at her elbow, smiling with genuine warmth that cut through her spiral of self-doubt like light through fog. "Emma, you look lovely. Come see how we installed your pieces." His voice carried enthusiasm that seemed authentic, not the performative support Emma had learned to recognize and distrust. He led her through the gallery, past clusters of people examining other artists' work, past waiters circulating with wine, and small elegant foods Emma would not let herself eat because taking felt like admitting she needed. They turned a corner into an alcove with perfect lighting, natural light from a skylight mixing with carefully positioned spots. And there they were. Her 3 paintings hung in a row, professionally mounted and lit, each one looking somehow more real and more vulnerable than it had in her apartment. The colors deeper, the emotions more raw, every brushstroke visible, every choice she had made laid bare for judgment. Beside them, a small placard read Emma Hayes in elegant script, and beneath her name, 3 titles and 3 prices that made her dizzy when she read them. $2,000 each. $6,000 total for work she had created late at night in a freezing apartment while trying not to think about rent or bills or the constant mathematics of poverty. $6,000. More money than she made in 3 months of full-time work. More money than she had ever imagined someone might pay for something she created. James, I can't charge this much. Her voice came out small, apologetic, already retreating from the possibility. You can and you will. His voice was firm but kind, the tone of someone who had this conversation before and knew all the arguments. Your work is worth this, more than this, but we start here and build your market. Let the work prove its value. Trust me, Emma. I've been doing this for 20 years. I know what sells and why. Your paintings will sell because they're honest, because they make people feel something real. That's rare. That's valuable. The gallery filled as 7 o'clock approached, the murmur of conversation rising like tide, punctuated by laughter, and the clink of wine glasses, and the soft classical music playing just loud enough to fill silence without demanding attention. Emma stood near her paintings and watched people examine them, her stomach in knots, her hands clasped behind her back to keep them from shaking. Some people moved on quickly, glancing and dismissing, their eyes sliding away toward work that was brighter or bolder or more immediately accessible. Others stood for long minutes, studying the brushwork, reading the emotions she had painted into every canvas, their faces shifting through reactions Emma could not quite interpret. A woman in her 60s stopped in front of waiting room and stood so still, Emma thought she might be ill. The woman's hand came up to her mouth. Her shoulders began to shake. When she finally turned away, there were tears on her face, tracks through carefully applied makeup, and she met Emma's eyes across the space with a look of such naked grief and recognition that Emma felt her own throat close. My husband, the woman said simply, her voice rough with emotion. County hospital, no insurance. 3 years ago. I understand this painting. I understand it in my bones. Emma nodded, her throat too tight for words, tears burning behind her eyes. This was why art mattered. Not the money or the recognition or the validation of hanging in a real gallery. This moment of connection. This proof that pain shared was pain survived. That telling the truth about suffering made the suffering mean something beyond just hurt. The woman reached out and squeezed Emma's hand, held it for a long moment, then moved on. Emma stood shaking, overwhelmed by the weight of being seen, of having someone look at her work and see not just technique or composition, but the naked truth of loss. At 7:15, she saw Alex enter. He wore a dark suit, no tie, and he moved through the gallery with the ease of someone comfortable in spaces like this. But when he saw her paintings, he stopped. Emma watched his face change, watched him see the work not as someone who had funded the showcase, but as someone who understood what it cost to create truth from grief. Victoria Ashford arrived at 7:20. Emma saw her before Alex did. Saw the way Victoria paused in the entrance, scanning the room with the practiced eye of someone who knew exactly what she was looking for. She wore a wine-colored dress that probably cost more than Emma's rent, her hair perfect, her makeup flawless. She looked like someone who belonged in this world, someone who had never had to choose between art and survival. Their eyes met across the gallery. Victoria smiled, cool and knowing, and began moving through the crowd with purpose. Emma's stomach clenched. Something was wrong. The way Victoria moved, the certainty in her expression, the woman beside her with a press badge and a recording device. Alex saw Victoria then. Emma watched his face go carefully blank. He started toward Emma, but Victoria reached her first. "Emma Hayes," Victoria said, her voice pitched to Carrie. "Congratulations on your show. It's quite an accomplishment for someone who just met Alexander Sterling a month ago." The gallery went quiet, in the way rooms do when people sense conflict. Emma felt eyes turning toward them, felt the weight of judgment settling over her shoulders. "Thank you," Emma said carefully. The woman with the press badge stepped forward. "Jessica Tanner, Manhattan Arts Weekly. Can I ask you a few questions about your journey from barista to gallery artist?" Emma's mouth went dry. This was an ambush. She looked at Alex, who had stopped 10 feet away, his expression pained but not surprised. He had known this might happen, had maybe tried to warn her, and she had not understood. "My journey started long before last month," Emma said, forcing her voice steady. "I've been painting since I was 8 years old." "Of course." Jessica's smile was pleasant and poisonous. "But you went from completely unknown to featured artist at a prestigious showcase in just a few weeks. Quite a meteoric rise. Can you tell us how that happened?" "I was invited based on my portfolio." "And who recommended you for that invitation?" Emma saw the trap, saw exactly where this was going. If she said she did not know, she looked naive. If she said Alex, she confirmed what they already believed, that she had slept her way into this gallery, that her work was not good enough to stand on its own. Alex stepped forward before she could answer. "I can answer that question." Jessica turned her recording device toward him. "Please do, Mr. Sterling." Emma Hayes' work was recommended to James Morrison by the Showcase Selection Committee, the same committee that reviewed 200 portfolios and selected 12 artists. The same process every artist here went through. "But you did fund the showcase, didn't you?" Jessica pressed. "The anonymous donation 6 months ago that made this entire event possible?" Sterling Foundation supports arts programs throughout the city. This showcase was one of many initiatives we fund, just as we fund dozens of galleries and community arts centers and school programs. This is not special treatment. This is standard practice. "And your personal relationship with Ms. Hayes, when did that begin?" Alex's jaw tightened. "That's not relevant to her work." "Isn't it, though?" Victoria stepped closer, her voice sympathetic in a way that felt like acid. "I think people deserve to know the context. That Emma met you exactly 4 weeks ago when she picked you up at the airport. That you've been seen together multiple times since. That you personally visited Harbor Arts Collective to review her work before James made his final selection." "I did no such thing," Alex said, his voice hard. "Didn't you?" Victoria pulled out her phone, showing a photo. "Alex entering Harbor Gallery 3 weeks ago. I have the date stamp. I was there for a meeting with James about overall programming, not about Emma specifically." "How convenient." Jessica made notes. "So you're saying it's pure coincidence that your girlfriend's work ended up in a showcase your foundation funded at a gallery you visited weeks before the selection was finalized?" "She's not my girlfriend," Alex said, and Emma felt the words like a slap even though they were technically true. "And her work speaks for itself. Anyone with eyes can see the talent." Emma wanted to disappear, wanted the floor to open and swallow her. Every person in the gallery was watching now, listening, judging. She saw the calculations in their eyes, the assumptions, the dismissal of her work as the product of sleeping with the right person rather than years of dedication. "This is exactly what I warned you about," Victoria said to Emma, her voice pitched for the growing audience. "Men like Alex don't see women like us as equals. We're projects, distractions, good for his image to support struggling artists, especially when she's pretty and grateful." "That's enough," Alex said. "Is it? Because I used to be where she is. I used to think he saw me for my talent, until I realized I'd given up my own career to be his arm candy at events just like this one." "Victoria, you left me." Alex's control was slipping. "You made that choice. After you made it impossible to be with you and still be myself." Victoria turned to Emma. "He'll do the same to you. He'll fund your work and introduce you to the right people, and slowly, so slowly you won't even notice, you'll stop being an artist and start being Alexander Sterling's charity project." "That's not true," Emma said, but her voice came out small and uncertain. "Isn't it?" Victoria's expression was pitying. "Look around. Everyone here is wondering if you earned this spot or if you slept your way into it. That question will follow you for the rest of your career. Every show, every sale, every opportunity. People will always wonder if it was talent or if it was him." The truth of it hit Emma like a physical blow. Victoria was right. Even if Emma's work was good, even if she had earned this, the shadow of Alex's money and influence would follow her forever. She would never know if people bought her paintings because they loved the work or because they wanted favor with Sterling Foundation. She would never know if galleries showed her because she deserved it or because Alex had made a phone call. She looked at Alex and saw her own devastation reflected in his face. He had tried to help, had tried to open doors without controlling what happened behind them. But in the world they lived in a system designed to favor people like him and erase people like her, good intentions were not enough. His help had poisoned the very thing he wanted to support. Emma, Alex started, but she held up her hand. Stop, just stop. She turned to Jessica Tanner, forcing herself to meet the reporter's eyes. You want a story? Here it is. I'm a barista from Queens who paints because it's the only thing that makes sense when nothing else does. I met Alexander Sterling by accident. We became friends. He did not get me this show. He did not force anyone to display my work. But his money did make this showcase possible. And now I'll never know if I'm here because I'm good enough or because I knew the right person. Her voice broke on the last words, but she pushed through. So congratulations, you've got your story about the gold digger artist and the bleeding heart CEO. I hope it sells papers. I hope it makes you feel good about yourself. I hope it was worth destroying someone's dream for a headline. Emma turned and walked toward the exit, her heels clicking on the polished concrete floor, each step an act of will. Behind her, she heard Alex call her name, his voice breaking on the syllables in a way that made her chest crack open. Heard James Morrison trying to calm the situation, his professional voice layered over the murmur of scandal and speculation. Heard the crowd dissecting what they had just witnessed, their voices already shaping the narrative that would follow her for the rest of her life. She pushed through the door into the February night and kept walking, her thin dress no protection against the cold that hit her like a physical blow. The cold bit through the fabric, through her skin, settled into her bones with the cruel efficiency of winter in New York. But she barely felt it. Her body was moving, but her mind was somewhere else, somewhere beyond pain or temperature, or the basic requirements of survival. She walked because stopping meant collapsing, and collapsing meant accepting that this was real, that her dream had died in front of an audience, that Victoria had been right about everything. Her phone buzzed in her bag. Alex calling. She declined without looking. It buzzed again. Rachel this time. Emma answered because Rachel had earned that much. I just saw it online, Rachel said, her voice tight with fury barely contained. That bitch posted photos already. It's trending on 3 different platforms. Where are you? Walking. It's 20 degrees out and you're in a dress. Let me come get you. I need to walk. Emma's voice sounded strange to her own ears, flat and distant, like it belonged to someone else. Then I'm tracking your phone and following you at a distance. You don't get to freeze to death on my watch. Emma hung up and kept walking. She walked through neighborhoods she did not know, past buildings where people lived lives she would never understand. Buildings with doormen and marble lobbies, and the kind of security that kept people like her on the outside. She walked through the theater district where tourists posed for photos and pretended the city was magical, past restaurants where a single meal cost more than her weekly grocery budget, through Times Square where screens blazed with advertisements for things she could never afford, selling dreams to people who could buy them. She walked until her feet blistered in her shoes, and the cold had numbed her face and her hands, and every part of her except the rage and shame burning in her chest. She walked until she could think again, until the shock had worn off enough to leave room for anger, until she could separate what had happened from who she was and begin to understand that she would survive this even though it felt like dying. She walked for 3 hours through the city that had promised her everything and given her nothing but new ways to fail. She walked past her cafe, dark and closed, where she would have to face customers tomorrow who had seen the article, who would look at her and know she had tried to climb above her station and been slapped back down. She walked past the art supply store where she had stood countless times, calculating whether she could afford brushes or food. Never both. She walked past the hospital where her father had died, the building looming against the night sky like a monument to every promise America had broken to people like them. By the time she reached her apartment building, it was after midnight. Rachel's car was parked outside, the engine running for heat, exhaust ghosting in the frozen air. Rachel got out when she saw Emma, wrapped her in a blanket without a word, and drove her the 3 blocks home, because even 3 blocks was too far in that cold. Inside her apartment, Emma pulled up the article on her phone with hands that had gone stiff from cold. The headline made her want to throw up, bile rising in her throat as she read the words that would define her now. Barista to beneficiary, the calculated climb of Alexander Sterling's latest charity case. The subheading was worse: how a struggling artist used looks and opportunity to manipulate her way into a prestigious gallery show. The photos showed her and Alex at the gallery, their body language analyzed for signs of intimacy by people who had never met them, had never seen them together, had never understood what it meant to try to build something real across an impossible distance. The text was carefully worded to avoid outright defamation, but dripping with implication. It questioned her talent, suggested she had used her looks to manipulate a lonely CEO, implied that every struggling artist would be better off finding a rich boyfriend than actually developing their craft. That mentorship was just prostitution with better PR. The comments were worse than the article, a sewer of opinions from people who had never painted anything, never struggled for anything, never risked anything, but had plenty of judgments about a woman they had never met. Some defended her, most did not. They called her a gold digger, a whore, a talentless hack who had slept her way into a gallery show she did not deserve. They said she was exactly what was wrong with the art world, with women, with society. They said Alex Sterling was an idiot and she was a calculating bitch, and together they were proof that merit meant nothing when you had the right connections. The court of public opinion had rendered its verdict: guilty. Guilty of ambition, guilty of being poor, guilty of trying to be something more than the world had decided she was allowed to be. Emma's phone rang at 1 a.m, pulling her from a half-sleep on the couch where she had collapsed after reading comments until the words blurred together into a single voice, telling her she was worthless. Unknown number. She almost did not answer, but something made her pick up, some instinct that bad news required acknowledgement. "Miss Hayes, this is Mr. Patterson, your landlord." "I know who you are." Her voice was rough from crying she did not remember doing. "I've been getting calls all evening. Reporters wanting to know about you. Photographers camping outside the building. Other tenants are complaining. Mrs. Kowalski on the 3rd floor says there were men following her, asking questions. This is unacceptable." "I'm sorry, I'll talk to them, make them leave." "That won't be necessary." His voice was formal, carefully devoid of sympathy. "I'm invoking the disturbance clause in your lease. You have 48 hours to vacate the premises." "But I paid rent. I'm current on everything." Emma sat up, panic cutting through exhaustion. "The clause doesn't require missed payments, just significant disturbance to other residents. And having media camped outside my building qualifies." "I'm sorry, Miss Hayes. This situation is disrupting the entire building. I have to think of the other tenants." He hung up before she could argue, before she could beg, before she could explain that she had nowhere to go, no money for a new deposit, no references that would not be tainted by the scandal. Emma sat on her couch, still in her dress, mascara smeared down her face, and felt the last piece of her life crumble into dust. She was losing her apartment, losing her reputation, losing the fragile sense that maybe, just maybe, she could make this work, could build something from nothing, could survive by talent instead of luck. Her phone rang again. Alex. She let it go to voicemail. He called 3 more times. Finally, she turned her phone off completely. Rachel stayed the night, sleeping on the floor beside Emma's bed like a guard dog. In the morning, Sophie arrived with coffee and boxes, and the grim determination of women who knew how to pack a life up quickly. They did not ask where Emma would go. They simply helped her pack, sorted her belongings into what mattered and what could be left behind, and made phone calls to find somewhere, anywhere, that would take her in. Linda called at noon. "Emma, I have a friend upstate. Riverside Community Art Center. They need a teacher. Room and board included. It's not much, but it's yours if you want it." Emma closed her eyes. Upstate meant leaving the city, leaving the only home she had known, Starting over somewhere, she would be anonymous again, but anonymous sounded better than notorious. I'll take it. She packed her canvases carefully, each one a piece of her soul she could not leave behind. She packed her father's old art supplies, the brushes he had used to teach her. She packed the bare minimum of clothes and left everything else for the landlord to deal with. On her last night in the apartment, Alex showed up. Rachel let him in with a warning glare that could have stripped paint. 5 minutes, Rachel said. Then I'm throwing you out myself. Alex looked like he had not slept. His suit was rumpled, his hair uncombed, his eyes hollow. Emma, I'm so sorry. Don't, she said, just don't. Let me fix this. Let me call the reporter, make a statement, use the foundation's resources to counter the narrative. You can't fix this, that's the problem. You can't fix this because the problem isn't the article or the reporters or even Victoria. The problem is that your money poisons everything it touches for people like me. You want to help, and helping destroys me. That's not fair, isn't it? Emma's voice was steady despite the tears. Look what happened. You tried to do the right thing, fund a showcase, let the selection committee work independently, support artists without strings. And it still got turned into proof that I'm a gold digger. Because in this world, people like you can't help people like me without everyone assuming we're corrupt or calculating or both. So what do? I leave. I start over somewhere else. I paint because painting is all I know how to do. And you go back to your foundation and your board meetings and your mission to save artists while being careful not to actually know any of us. Emma. His voice broke on her name, but she hardened her heart against it. You said you wanted to know me, really know me, but you can't, not in a way that doesn't destroy one of us. Because knowing you means being defined by you. And I can't afford that. I've lost too much already. What did you lose? Everything. My apartment, my reputation, the dream that maybe I could make this work, that maybe talent actually mattered more than connections. You took that from me, not on purpose, not maliciously, but you took it anyway. Alex looked at her with such pain in his eyes that she almost relented, almost reached for him, almost let him hold her and promise that they would figure it out together. But she had learned from Victoria. Some choices, once made, could not be unmade, and letting Alex Sterling into her heart fully would mean watching herself disappear piece by piece until nothing remained but his version of who he wanted her to be. I love you, he said quietly, for whatever that's worth. It's worth everything and nothing, Emma said. That's the tragedy. She did not watch him leave, could not. She turned her back and heard his footsteps, the door opening and closing, the final sound of something ending before it had really begun. The next morning, Sophie drove her upstate in a borrowed van. They did not talk much. What was there to say? That sometimes the world broke you for trying? That sometimes love was not enough? That the gap between their two worlds was not measured in miles, but in the accumulated weight of systems designed to keep people in their place? Riverside appeared through winter rain, a small town that looked like it belonged to another century. The art center was a converted warehouse on the edge of town, all exposed brick and high ceilings and natural light. Marcus Chen, the director, met her at the door with kind eyes and no questions about why someone from New York City had appeared on her doorstep looking for work. Your apartment is upstairs, Margaret said. Small but comfortable. Classes start Monday if you're ready. No pressure if you need time. I'm ready, Emma lied, because what else could she say? That night, alone in her new apartment, Emma set up her easel and stared at a blank canvas. For the first time in her life, she had no idea what to paint. Her hands knew the motions, but her heart was empty. She had poured everything into her work, into believing that art could save her. And it had not been enough. It would never be enough, because talent without connections was invisible, and connections came with prices she could not afford to pay. She thought about Alex, somewhere in the city, probably fighting with his board about the scandal, probably trying to fix what could not be fixed. She thought about Victoria's warning, about Linda's wisdom, about her father's last words. Keep painting. But what did you paint when painting was what had destroyed you? Emma did not know. She only knew that the story was not over, that somewhere in the rubble of her demolished life, there had to be something worth salvaging, some truth worth telling, some way forward that did not require either giving up on love or giving up on herself. She picked up her brush, Started with a single line, then another. Slowly, painfully, a shape emerged. Two figures back to back, not touching, both looking toward different horizons. The space between them filled not with gold coins, but with paintings, with words, with all the things that mattered more than money and less than survival. She did not know what the painting meant, did not know if it was good or honest or worth finishing, but it was something. And something was more than nothing. And nothing was what she had left. The city continued its indifferent rhythm 2 hours south. Alex stood in his office overlooking Manhattan and made a decision that would cost him everything he had built. He called his lawyer, called his board, called every contact he had and told them the same thing. He was stepping down as CEO of Sterling Foundation, effective immediately. The foundation deserved better than a scandal. Emma deserved better than to be collateral damage in his attempt to do good. And maybe, just maybe, removing himself from the equation would let her work speak for itself again. Let her be seen without the shadow of his influence, distorting every perception. It was too late to save what they had, too late to undo the damage, but maybe it was not too late to prove that he had meant what he said about seeing her, about wanting her to be whole more than he wanted her to be his. He signed the papers, sent the emails, watched his phone explode with calls he did not answer. And when it was done, when he had dismantled the empire he had built on his sister's grave, he stood at his window and wondered if sacrifice counted when you were the one who had caused the wound. Neither of them knew that the story was not over, that sometimes destruction was necessary before rebuilding, that sometimes the space between two people had to become a wasteland before it could become a bridge. They knew only this. They had lost everything. And in the wreckage of their demolished lives, they would have to decide if anything was worth fighting for, if love was a reason or an excuse, if hope was foolishness or the only wisdom that mattered. The answer would take time to find. And time, as Emma had learned watching her father die, was the one currency no one could buy. Sometimes you have to lose everything to understand what truly matters. And sometimes redemption requires help from the last person you expected. March arrived in Riverside with the kind of cold rain that felt personal, like nature itself was mourning something. Emma had been in the small upstate town for 3 weeks, teaching art to children who arrived at the community center, with winter still clinging to their coats and hope shining in their eyes, despite lives that had given them every reason to stop hoping. The work was simple in a way that felt sacred. Show a child how to hold a brush. Teach them that mistakes in art were just opportunities the canvas had not revealed yet. Watch their faces transform when they realized they could make something beautiful from nothing, that their hands were capable of more than they had been told. The apartment above the art center was small but warm, a single room with a kitchenette and a bathroom that had water pressure issues but worked well enough. Emma's entire life fit into this space now, her canvases stacked against one wall, her father's old art supplies on the shelf, the few clothes she had kept. The existence she had rebuilt from the wreckage of her New York dreams felt both smaller and somehow more honest than anything that had come before. Margaret Chen, the director, had asked no questions when Emma arrived with everything she owned packed into garbage bags in a borrowed van, Sophie driving and crying the whole way upstate. Margaret was 68, widowed, a former art teacher who had started the center 20 years ago in a rented garage and built it into something that mattered through sheer, stubborn refusal to let poverty erase beauty. She had simply shown Emma the apartment, handed her the keys, and said classes started Monday if she was ready. Emma had not been ready, had not known if she would ever be ready again. But she had shown up anyway because showing up was all she knew how to do, the only skill poverty had taught her that felt worth keeping. The first class had been 12 children, ages 6 to 14, a mix of kids whose parents worked 2 jobs and could not afford private lessons, and kids who had been labeled difficult at school and needed somewhere to channel energy that the system had decided was a problem, instead of recognizing it as the fire necessary for creation. Emma had stood in front of them with a blank canvas and felt the weight of their expectation. What did she have to teach them? She who had lost everything, who had been destroyed by the very dream she was supposed to be helping them chase, who had learned that talent was not enough when the world was rigged against people like them. But then a girl named Mia, 9 years old with serious dark eyes and clothes worn twice a week because her mother could not afford more, had raised her hand and asked in a voice that shook slightly, "Miss Hayes, why do you paint?" Not how, why, the question that mattered. And Emma had answered with the only truth she had left, the only thing the scandal and the loss and the public humiliation had not managed to take from her. Because when I paint, I exist. When I create something, I prove that I matter, that my pain and my joy and my life mean something beyond just surviving. Because making art is the only way I know to fight back against a world that wants people like us to disappear. The children had understood that in the way children understand essential truths, that adults have learned to complicate with excuses and rationalizations, and the careful lies we tell ourselves about why things have to be the way they are. They had picked up their brushes and begun to create, and Emma had felt something in her chest that had been frozen solid since the gallery disaster began to thaw. Purpose. Not the grand purpose of gallery shows and critical acclaim and proving the world wrong about her worth. The simple purpose of helping someone else find their voice. The purpose that had nothing to do with her own success and everything to do with passing forward what her father had given her. The knowledge that making beauty was resistance. That creating was how you survive systems designed to crush you. 2 months had passed now. Emma taught 5 classes a week, spent her evenings painting in the small studio space Margaret had cleared for her, in what used to be a storage closet, and tried very hard not to think about New York, about Alex, about the paintings that had hung in Harbor Arts Collective for exactly 47 minutes before James Morrison had taken them down to protect Emma from further exposure, from the media circus that wanted to dissect her ambition and find proof that women who reach deserve to fall, about the life she had almost had before it was destroyed by the gap between their two worlds proving too wide to bridge. The distance between poverty and wealth measured not in miles, but in the accumulated weight of assumptions neither of them could escape. She painted different subjects now, not the raw grief and anger that had defined her city work, not the visceral honesty about her father's death and her own invisibility. Gentler things. A child's hands covered in paint, fingers spread wide to show the colors like proof of miracle. Spring light through the art center windows making dust motes dance like they were celebrating something. The view from her apartment of the river that gave the town its name, water moving constant and patient toward destinations it would reach without hurrying. She was painting survival instead of suffering, painting the slow work of rebuilding a life from wreckage, painting hope that did not deny pain but insisted on existing alongside it. She did not know if the work was good, did not particularly care. It was honest. That felt like enough. That felt like more than she had managed in New York, where every brushstroke had been calculated to prove something, to justify her existence, to convince the world she deserved the space she occupied. Here, she painted because painting was what she did, not because she had anything to prove, just because it was Tuesday and she had brushes, and the silence of her apartment needed filling with color. On a Thursday morning that arrived with unexpected sunshine, Emma was setting up for her afternoon class when Margaret appeared in the doorway of the studio, her expression carefully neutral in the way of someone carrying news they were not sure how to deliver. "Emma, I need to talk to you about something. Can we step into my office?" Emma's stomach clenched. She had been waiting for this, for the moment when the scandal caught up with her even here, when Margaret learned the full story and decided that having Emma on staff was more trouble than it was worth. She followed Margaret into the small office that smelled like coffee and paper, and years of nonprofit work, stretching budgets that were never quite enough. Margaret sat behind her desk and pulled out a folder. "I received a very interesting letter this morning from Sterling Foundation." Emma felt her heart stop. She had not heard that name spoken aloud in 2 months, had trained herself not to think it, not to Google it, not to let herself wonder what Alex was doing, or if he thought about her, or if he regretted everything as much as she did. "They're offering us a grant," Margaret continued, $50,000, unrestricted funding to support our programming, with a particular focus on making classes permanently free for students who cannot afford tuition. Emma could not breathe, could not think, could not process what this meant. "I'm going to turn it down," Margaret said quietly. "What? Why?" "Because I know what happened in New York. I read the articles. I'm not an idiot, Emma. and I'm not going to accept money that might be intended to manipulate you or make you feel obligated or guilty. It's not like that, Emma heard herself say, though she had no idea if that was true. Isn't it? Margaret's voice was gentle but firm. You came here to get away from a man whose money complicated everything. I'm not going to let his money follow you here. Emma sat down because her legs had stopped being reliable. She thought about the children in her classes, about Mia, whose single mother cleaned houses and could barely afford groceries, much less art supplies, about the 3 boys who came from the group home and needed this space more than they needed anything else, about the waiting list of kids who wanted classes but could not pay the $40 monthly fee that was already a fraction of what art education cost in the city. The money isn't for me, Emma said slowly. It's for them, for the kids who need this. I know, but I also know that nothing comes without strings, and I won't risk you or this program for funding that might disappear the moment you do something he doesn't like. Emma thought about Alex, about the way he had funded the Harbor Showcase anonymously, trying to help without controlling, about the way he had never once asked her for anything in return for the small mercies that had appeared when she needed them most, about the way he had stepped down from his own foundation, according to the one article Sophie had sent her against Emma's explicit instructions not to, because he thought his presence was poison to the mission. Call them, Emma said. Ask them to put in writing that the grant is permanent, renewable annually for 5 years minimum, with no strings attached. Ask them to specify that it continues regardless of my employment status here. If they agree to that, take the money. The kids need it more than I need pride. Margaret studied her for a long moment. You're sure? I'm sure that 47 kids are on a waiting list because we can't afford to run more classes. I'm sure that Mia is wearing the same 3 shirts in rotation because her mom can't afford new clothes and art supplies. I'm sure that this program changes lives. If Sterling Foundation wants to fund that with no strings, then we take the money and we use it the way it's supposed to be used, to give kids chances they wouldn't have otherwise. Margaret nodded slowly. I'll call them this afternoon. She did. Emma sat in her apartment that evening and stared at her phone, willing it not to ring, terrified it would. But the call did not come to her. It went to Margaret, who spent 40 minutes negotiating terms with someone named Marcus Chen, who worked for Sterling Foundation. By the time Margaret knocked on Emma's door at 7 that night, the agreement was in writing. $50,000 a year for 5 years minimum, unrestricted funding, no requirement for Emma to be involved in any way, no publicity, no strings. They agreed to everything, Margaret said, wonder in her voice. This is going to change everything for us. We can hire another teacher, expand to evening classes for adults, buy real supplies instead of bargain bin materials. Emma, this is miracle money. Emma nodded, unable to speak past the lump in her throat. She knew what this cost Alex. Knew that writing that check meant thinking about her, meant deciding to help anyway, even though she had told him his help was poison. Knew that he was trying to prove something she had accused him of not understanding. That support did not have to be control. That love could be letting go. That night, she painted. Not the gentle healing work she had been doing. Something raw and true and complicated. 2 figures on opposite sides of a canvas, both facing away, both alone. But between them, not emptiness. Paintings, small and glowing and multiplying like stars. The work they had both given everything to. The mission that mattered more than their hurt feelings or broken hearts. She titled it The Space We Made, and knew she would never sell it, never show it, never let anyone see it but herself. It was a private conversation with someone 2 hours away, who she might never speak to again. Alex had not known despair until the morning he woke up in his apartment and realized he had nothing to do. No board meeting to attend. No budget to review, no staff to manage. He had built his entire adult life around Sterling Foundation, around the mission of honoring his sister's memory by helping artists who needed what she had needed and never received. And in one afternoon, he had signed it all away to protect the foundation from the scandal his relationship with Emma had created. Marcus had tried to stop him, had argued that stepping down was exactly what Victoria and Robert Whitmore wanted, that it handed them victory. But Alex had been past caring about victory. Emma was gone. His reputation was destroyed. The foundation he had built was tainted by accusations of favoritism and corruption. The only honorable thing left to do was remove himself from the equation and hope the mission survived his absence. The first week had been a blur of legal paperwork and angry phone calls from board members demanding he reconsider. The second week had been worse because the calls stopped, and the silence meant they had accepted his resignation and moved on without him. By the third week, Alex was living the life of someone who had nothing left to lose and no idea what to do with that freedom. He slept late because there was no reason to wake early, ate takeout because cooking for one felt pathetic, avoided news and social media because every mention of Sterling Foundation was a reminder of what he had given up. His apartment, which had always been a place to sleep between the real work of his life, became a prison, expensive and comfortable and utterly empty. Marcus showed up on a Thursday morning in late March without calling first, which meant it was important. He let himself in with the spare key Alex had given him years ago, and found Alex sitting on the couch in sweatpants and a t-shirt, unshaven, looking like someone who had given up on the pretense of being functional. "You look like hell," Marcus said without preamble. "Thanks for the pep talk. Get dressed, we're going to the office." "I don't have an office anymore." "You do. I never cleaned it out." Marcus's voice was hard. "And you need to see something." "What could I possibly need to see?" "Proof that you were right to leave. And proof that you need to come back." Alex wanted to argue, but Marcus's expression allowed no room for negotiation. He showered and dressed and followed Marcus to Sterling Foundation Tower, the building he had avoided for 3 weeks because walking in without purpose felt like visiting a grave. His office was exactly as he had left it. Photographs of Lily still on the desk, books about nonprofit management still on the shelves, the view of Manhattan still breathtaking in the late morning light. Marcus closed the door and pulled out his laptop. "I've been going through foundation finances. Routine audit stuff that nobody pays attention to because we trust our CFO to handle the details." "Robert Whitmore." Alex's voice was flat. "What did you find?" Marcus turned the laptop around. Spreadsheets filled the screen, highlighted rows showing discrepancies Alex would have missed if he was not looking for them. "This is a shell nonprofit called Educational Arts Alliance, registered 18 months ago. Sterling Foundation has paid them $4.2 million for services rendered." "What services?" "That's the question." Marcus pulled up more documents. The invoices are vague: consulting fees, program support, administrative costs. But when I dug deeper, Educational Arts Alliance has no staff, no office, no programs. It's a post office box in Delaware and a bank account in the Cayman Islands. Alex felt something cold settle in his stomach. Robert's been embezzling for at least 18 months, probably longer. But I can only trace back that far with the records I have access to. He set up the shell company, approved invoices to it, and moved foundation money into accounts he controls. "How much total?" Marcus met his eyes. "Best estimate, 6 to 7 million, maybe more." The number was obscene. That money was supposed to fund programs for kids who needed art education the way Lily had needed it. Money that should have paid for supplies and teachers and spaces where creativity could flourish instead of being crushed by poverty and neglect. Robert had stolen it, had stolen from children, had stolen from Lily's memory. "Do you have proof that would stand up in court?" "Not yet, but I can get it. I have a friend at the IRS who owes me a favor. If we can get Educational Arts Alliance's bank records, we can trace the money." "Why are you showing me this?" "Because you built this foundation. You get to decide what we do about it." Marcus's voice was steady. "And because I think you need a reason to fight." Alex looked at the spreadsheets, at the evidence of betrayal by someone he had trusted to protect the mission. He thought about Emma, who had accused him of using his money to control things, who had walked away because she thought his help was poison. What would she think if she knew that while he was trying to help her, Robert was stealing from the children they both wanted to serve? "What do you need from me?" "Help me build an airtight case. Then we take it to the board and we take it to the authorities. We get Robert arrested and we get the money back and we save this foundation. And then what? Then you come back. Not as CEO maybe, but as someone who gives a damn about the mission. Someone who won't let one scandal destroy 10 years of work." Alex thought about it, about the risk of coming back, of putting himself in the public eye again when the Emma Hayes scandal was barely 2 months old, about the satisfaction of destroying Robert Whitmore, who had used the scandal Alex created to seize power and then abuse that power to steal. About the possibility of doing something right for once instead of causing damage while trying to help. Okay, Alex said, let's build the case. They worked for 2 weeks in secret, Alex and Marcus operating out of Alex's apartment instead of the foundation office, gathering evidence piece by piece. Bank records, email trails, invoices that did not match any real work. They found 47 grants that had been approved by the board and then mysteriously never funded. Programs that should have received money and instead got apology letters about budget constraints, while Educational Arts Alliance invoices continued to be paid in full. One name on the unfunded list made Alex's hands shake when he saw it. Riverside Community Art Center, approved for $50,000 16 months ago. Never received a penny. That's where Emma is, Marcus said quietly. She's teaching there. I know. Did you know we approved their grant? No. Alex stared at the document. Robert blocked it, along with 46 others. He kept the money and told the organizations they had been declined due to budget issues. Then he sent it to his shell company instead. Alex felt rage settle cold and focused in his chest. Emma had ended up at Riverside by accident, running from him and the scandal and the life that had imploded in New York. But Riverside should have had funding to expand their programs, to pay teachers better, to serve more kids. Emma should have arrived at a thriving program instead of one held together by duct tape, and Margaret Chen's refusal to give up. We send them the money, Alex said. Today, full amount plus interest for the delay, and we fund them for the next 5 years. Alex, that might not be smart. If Emma finds out you're involved, she already thinks I ruin everything I touch. At least this way I'll have done something useful. Send the money, make it clean, no strings, no publicity, just the funding they were supposed to get 18 months ago. Marcus made the call that afternoon. By evening, the grant agreement was drafted and sent to Margaret Chen with apologies for the administrative delay that had held up their funding. Alex did not know if Emma would find out he was behind it, did not know if she would care, knew only that this was right, that some debts had to be paid regardless of whether anyone thanked you for it. 2 days later, Victoria Ashford called him. Alex almost did not answer, but curiosity won over caution. I heard you've been investigating Robert, she said without preamble. How did you hear that? I have friends on the board. They're worried you're going to cause another scandal. Robert's the scandal, I'm just exposing it. Victoria was quiet for a moment. I want to help. Why would you help me? Because I was wrong about Emma, about you, about all of it. I spent 2 months watching Robert dismantle everything you built and realizing I was a fool to think tearing you down would make me feel better about my own choices. You ambushed Emma at her gallery opening. I know. And I'm not asking you to forgive me. I'm asking you to let me fix some of the damage I caused. How? I'm on the board. I can call an emergency meeting. I can convince the other members to hear your evidence. Robert's been making mistakes, getting sloppy because he thinks he won. I can help you trap him. What do you want in return? Nothing. Victoria's voice was tired. I want to do one right thing after months of wrong ones. That's all. Alex did not trust her motives, but he trusted the mathematics of power. Victoria had influence with board members who would not take Alex's calls. She had Robert's confidence, which meant she could help set the trap. And most importantly, she sounded like someone who had realized too late that revenge was not the same as justice. Okay, Alex said, but if you betray me again, I will make sure everyone knows exactly what kind of person you are. Fair enough? They planned for a week. Victoria convinced the board to hold an emergency meeting about foundation finances, told Robert it was routine oversight, nothing to worry about. Meanwhile, Marcus finished building the case with help from his IRS contact, documenting every fraudulent invoice, every missing grant, every dollar that had disappeared into Robert's offshore accounts. The meeting was scheduled for a Tuesday morning in April, the kind of spring day that promised renewal but delivered rain. Alex wore his best suit, the charcoal gray Tom Ford he had bought for his first major donor meeting 10 years ago, and practiced staying calm while Marcus assembled presentation materials that laid out the evidence in terms too clear to dismiss, too damning to ignore. The night before, Alex could not sleep. He stood at his window looking at the city and thought about Emma, wondered if she was sleeping in her small apartment above the art center, if she was painting something that would never hang in a gallery because she had learned the cost of exposure, if she thought about him at all, or if she had moved on to a life where he was just a mistake she had learned from and filed away. The boardroom was full when Alex arrived at exactly 9 a.m. Not early enough to seem desperate, but not late enough to seem disrespectful. 8 members plus Robert Whitmore sitting at the head of the table looking smug and comfortable and utterly confident that this meeting was a formality that would end with Alex being escorted from the building permanently. Victoria sat 3 seats down, her face carefully neutral, giving no indication that she had helped orchestrate this confrontation. Alex took his seat across from Robert, and Marcus set up the projector with hands that were steady despite what they were about to reveal. "I appreciate you all agreeing to meet," Alex began, his voice level despite the adrenaline coursing through him. "I know there are concerns about my judgment given recent events, the scandal with Emma Hayes, my decision to step down, my fitness to be involved with this foundation in any capacity. But I have information about foundation finances that requires immediate attention. Information that affects every program we fund and every child we serve." Robert leaned back in his chair, with the casual arrogance of someone who believed himself untouchable. "This feels like a waste of board time, Alex. You're no longer CEO. Financial oversight is my responsibility now. If you have concerns, you should bring them through proper channels." I did. I brought them to Marcus, who serves on this board, and now we're bringing them to all of you. Marcus pulled up the first slide, the Educational Arts Alliance letterhead stark against the white screen. Over the past 18 months, Sterling Foundation has paid $4.2 million to a company called Educational Arts Alliance for consulting services. Robert, can you tell the board what work this company performed? What tangible results we received for $4 million? The room shifted. Alex saw board members lean forward, their expressions changing from bored tolerance to active interest. Robert's hands tightened on the armrests of his chair, knuckles going white, but his face remained calm. They provided program evaluation and grant management support, detailed reports on the effectiveness of our funding allocations, consulting on best practices for nonprofit management, standard overhead for an organization of our size. Strange, Marcus said, clicking to the next slide showing the Delaware P.O. box and lack of any physical presence. Because Educational Arts Alliance has no staff, no office, no website, no track record of any work for any other organization anywhere in the nonprofit sector. It appears to exist solely to receive payments from this foundation, which raises some questions. The temperature in the room dropped. Alex watched color drain from Robert's face, even as he tried to maintain composure. "I don't appreciate what you're implying," Robert said, his voice tight. "We're not implying anything," Marcus continued through the slides with methodical precision. "We're presenting evidence. 47 approved grants that were never funded despite board approval. Organizations that applied for support were told they qualified and then received rejection letters citing budget constraints, all while Educational Arts Alliance invoices continued to be paid in full and on time." Slide after slide. Evidence mounting like a prosecutor building a case. Invoices for work that was never performed. Grants that disappeared into offshore accounts. Money that should have gone to art programs for at-risk youth instead funding Robert Whitmore's retirement plan. "This is ridiculous," Robert said, standing abruptly, his chair scraping against the floor. "I don't have to sit here and be slandered by someone who nearly destroyed this foundation with his poor judgment." "Sit down," Victoria said quietly, her voice cutting through the tension like a blade. "We're going to hear all of it. Every number, every invoice, every lie you told while you were stealing from children." Robert turned to her with a look of betrayal so pure, it might have been funny if the circumstances were different. "You set this up. You brought me here for this ambush." "I'm protecting this foundation," Victoria said, her voice steady. "Something you stopped doing the moment you saw an opportunity to profit from Alex's scandal. You used his mistakes as cover for your own. That's not protection. That's opportunism." The presentation took 40 minutes. Marcus walked through every transaction, every suspicious pattern, every piece of evidence that pointed to systematic theft. He showed emails where Robert had personally signed off on grants and then never processed the payments, showed bank records obtained through legal channels that traced Educational Arts Alliance accounts back to shell companies Robert controlled, showed the mathematics of betrayal in spreadsheets and numbers that could not lie. By the end, 2 board members were crying. their tears falling onto legal pads where they had been taking notes. One was on the phone with his lawyer asking what the foundation's liability was, whether they could be sued by the organizations that had been denied funding. Robert sat frozen, his carefully constructed empire of lies crumbling under the weight of evidence he had never imagined anyone would uncover. "We have copies of all documentation for the authorities," Alex said, looking directly at Robert. "Federal prosecutors, the IRS, the FBI. The question before this board is simple. Do we turn this over to law enforcement and try to recover the stolen funds? Or do we cover it up to avoid another scandal? Do we protect the foundation's reputation, or do we protect its integrity?" "We turn it over," Victoria said immediately, her voice brooking no argument. "We have no choice. If we cover this up and it comes out later, and it will come out, then we're accomplices. Then we've betrayed everything this foundation is supposed to stand for." "I second that," said Margaret Wilson, the board member who had been crying. "My daughter needed art therapy when she was struggling with depression. Sterling Foundation paid for it. It saved her life. How many kids didn't get that chance because this man stole their funding?" The vote was unanimous. 8 voices saying yes to truth, yes to accountability, yes to the hard right thing instead of the easy wrong one. Robert was escorted from the building by security, while lawyers made calls to the FBI and the IRS and prepared documentation for criminal referral. By afternoon, federal agents were serving search warrants on Robert's home and office. By evening, Robert Whitmore was under arrest for embezzlement and fraud, the news breaking across every media outlet that had covered the Emma Hayes scandal with such relish 2 months prior. Alex sat in his old office and felt something unclench in his chest. This was not redemption. Catching a thief did not undo the damage he had caused Emma or repair the foundation's tarnished reputation. But it was something. It was proof that the mission mattered more than personal comfort, that sometimes doing the right thing required destroying what you built so it could be rebuilt on honest foundations. Marcus appeared in the doorway with 2 glasses and a bottle of whiskey that had been in Alex's desk drawer for 5 years. "Thought you might need this." They drank in silence, watching the sunset over Manhattan. "The board wants you back," Marcus said eventually. "CEO position is yours if you want it." "Do I want it?" "That's a question only you can answer." Marcus poured another round. "But I think Emma would want you to fight for the foundation, even if she doesn't want you to fight for her." Alex thought about the money sent to Riverside, about the programs that would now be funded, about the children who would get chances they deserved. He thought about Emma teaching those children, pouring into them the same passion she had poured into her art. He thought about the space between them, still unbridged, but maybe not unbridgeable. "I'll do it," Alex said, "but different this time, transparent, accountable. No more anonymous donations or quiet favors. Everything in the light where people can see it." "That's going to be harder." "Good. The easy way almost destroyed everything." That night, Alex drafted an email to Emma, deleted it, wrote another, deleted that too. What could he say that would not sound like excuses or attempts to manipulate? Finally, he sent one line to Margaret Chen instead. "The grant to Riverside was approved before I met Emma. Robert blocked it as part of his embezzlement scheme. I'm sorry it took this long to reach you. The mission continues." He did not know if Margaret would show Emma the email, did not know if it would matter. Knew only that truth, however late, was better than silence. In Riverside, spring was finally arriving. Emma stood in the art center watching Mia paint a landscape that showed more technical skill than any 9-year-old should have, and felt something close to peace. The grant had changed everything. They had expanded to evening classes, hired 2 more teachers, bought supplies that let students experiment without worrying about waste. The waiting list was gone. Every child who wanted to learn could learn. Margaret had told her about Robert's arrest, about the embezzlement, about Alex's role in exposing it and recovering the money, had shown her the email explaining that Riverside's grant had been approved long before the scandal, that it was not about Emma, that the mission was bigger than any individual. Emma had read the email 3 times, trying to find manipulation in it, trying to see the strings. Found only exhaustion and honesty and the sense of someone trying very hard to do right after doing so much wrong. She painted that night, working by the light of a single lamp while rain drummed against the window, and the rest of Riverside slept. Not the gentle work she had been doing, not the careful rebuilding of a self that had been shattered. Something fierce and complicated and true. Something that demanded to be made even though she had no audience for it, no gallery that would show it, no critic who would see it. She painted for the same reason she had always painted, because the truth in her chest needed to exist outside her body, or it would consume her from within. The painting that emerged showed a man standing in ruins, surrounded by broken columns and shattered foundations, holding a single brick in his hands and looking at the ground where something new could be built. His face was turned toward light coming from somewhere beyond the frame, and his expression carried exhaustion and determination in equal measure. This was not defeat. This was the moment after defeat, when you had to decide whether to stay down or stand back up. The moment when you learned what you were actually made of. She titled it, After the Fall, and knew as soon as she stepped back to look at it that this was the best thing she had painted in months, maybe years. Not because of technique or composition or any of the formal elements that critics judged, because it was true, because she had painted Alex as she understood him now, not as the powerful CEO who had complicated her life or the wealthy benefactor whose help had poisoned everything, but as a human being who had made mistakes and was trying, however imperfectly, to make them right. She wanted him to see it, wanted him to know that she had been watching from a distance, that she had been paying attention, that she understood what it cost to tear down what you built for the sake of what was right, wanted him to know that maybe, just maybe, she had not completely written him off, that the space between them was not empty, but filled with the complicated truth of two people who had hurt each other while trying not to. She packaged it carefully the next day, wrapping it in brown paper and bubble wrap borrowed from Margaret, addressing it to Sterling Foundation with no return address because she was not ready for conversation, but wanted him to know she was still here, still painting, still thinking about the mission they had both given too much to. The painting arrived at Alex's office on a Tuesday morning, carried by a delivery service that had no information about the sender. Marcus brought it in, his expression curious, and helped Alex unwrap it carefully. When the image was revealed, Alex felt his breath catch in his throat, felt something in his chest crack open that had been holding very tight for very long. He saw himself in it, saw the ruins and the foundation and the exhaustion and the stubborn refusal to give up even when giving up would be easier. Saw that Emma had been watching from a distance, had been paying attention, had maybe not completely written him off. The painting was not forgiveness. It was something more complicated. Acknowledgement, witness. The statement that she saw what he had done and understood the cost, even if she was not ready to trust him again. He hung it on his office wall where he could see it every day, when he sat at his desk trying to rebuild what Robert had nearly destroyed. A reminder that some things were worth rebuilding, even when the work was hard and the outcome uncertain. That love, real love, meant seeing someone's worst mistakes and hardest battles and choosing to witness them anyway. That Emma Hayes was still painting, still creating, still fighting to exist in a world that wanted to erase her. Alex worked through lunch that day and into the evening, his mind racing with possibilities. He could not send her money, could not fix her problems or make her life easier without risking the same dynamic that had destroyed them before. But he could do what she had done. He could paint truth. He could send acknowledgement. He had not painted since college, since before Lily died, and grief became the only language he spoke fluently. But he found supplies at an art store that stayed open late and set up in his apartment with a canvas and brushes that felt foreign in his hands. He painted badly at first, his technique rusty and his vision unclear. But he kept working, building layers, finding the image that wanted to exist. What emerged after hours of work was simple. Two hands reaching toward the same paintbrush, neither quite holding it yet, the space between their fingers charged with possibility. The background was abstract, undefined, because the where and when did not matter as much as the reaching itself. He titled it, Not Yet But Maybe, and sent it to Riverside Community Art Center addressed to Emma Hayes with the same lack of return address she had used. It arrived 3 days later. Emma unwrapped it in her apartment with hands that shook slightly. not knowing what to expect. When she saw the image, she sat down on her bed and cried for reasons she could not fully articulate. Not sadness, not joy, something more complicated. The recognition that he had understood her message and responded in kind, that he was willing to be vulnerable in a language that mattered to her, that maybe the space between them could be crossed if both of them were brave enough to keep reaching. She responded with a painting of the river at Riverside, gold light on water moving towards somewhere neither of them could see yet. She titled it, "Hope is a Direction, Not a Destination," and sent it south. He sent back a Manhattan skyline at dawn, buildings emerging from darkness into light. He titled it, "New Beginnings Are Not the Same as Fresh Starts, but They Count," and included no note because the painting said everything. The paintings they sent each other over the next 2 months became a conversation neither had the courage to have in words. Each canvas was a statement, a question, a confession. Emma sent images of healing and growth and the slow work of becoming whole again. Alex sent images of rebuilding and accountability and the difference between reputation and integrity. Neither painting was perfect. Neither artist was trying for perfection. They were trying for truth. And truth, as both of them were learning, was the only foundation strong enough to build on. The only currency that mattered when everything else had been stripped away. The only bridge that could span the distance between two people who had lost everything and were trying to figure out if anything was worth fighting for. Margaret noticed the paintings arriving and departing, but asked no questions, just smiled knowingly, and made sure Emma had access to good shipping materials. Marcus did the same on his end, arranging for discreet couriers and never mentioning the increasingly frequent art deliveries to anyone else at the foundation. By June, Emma's apartment walls were covered with Alex's paintings, and her studio was filling with new work she was creating not for him, but because of him. Because being seen had reminded her why she painted in the first place. Not for galleries or recognition or proof of worth, but because making art was how she stayed human in a world that wanted to reduce her to a statistic, a scandal, a cautionary tale about ambition and class. By June, Alex's office had become a gallery of Emma's vision, her paintings covering the walls where corporate art had hung before. Every morning when he arrived at work, he saw her truth first, before the budget meetings and donor calls and the endless work of nonprofit management. He saw what she had survived and what she had made from that survival, and it reminded him why any of this mattered. They were rebuilding, separately but not entirely alone. The space between them was still there, still vast, still complicated by everything that had broken, and the scars that had not healed, and the very real question of whether love could survive the gap between their worlds. But it was no longer empty. It was filled with proof that they saw each other, that they had not forgotten, that maybe, someday, when they were both stronger and the wounds were less raw, they could try again. For now, that was enough. For now, the painting said what words could not. For now, the hope was not in the having but in the reaching. And reaching, both of them were learning, was its own kind of courage, its own kind of love. True love is not about grand gestures or perfect timing. It is about showing up, being honest, and choosing each other even after everything falls apart. It is about proving through action that some mistakes are worth making because they lead us home. August arrived in both Riverside and Manhattan with the kind of heat that made the whole world slow down and reconsider its choices. Emma had been teaching at the Community Art Center for 6 months, and in that time, she had watched 47 children discover that their hands could make beauty from nothing. Mia, the 9-year-old girl with serious eyes and twice-worn clothes, had progressed so rapidly that her work was being considered for a youth exhibition at a gallery in Albany. 3 boys from the group home had found in painting an outlet that kept them out of the trouble the system expected them to find. A shy 14-year-old named Lucas had told Emma that her class was the only hour of his week when he did not want to disappear. This was the work that mattered, not the galleries or the critics or the validation of people who measured worth in dollars and column inches. This quiet transformation of children, who had been told implicitly and explicitly that people like them did not get to be artists, did not get to dream in color, did not get to believe their vision of the world deserved to exist. Emma gave them permission to create. And in giving that permission, she had somehow given it back to herself. She still painted late into the night, but the work had changed. The raw grief and anger that had defined her New York paintings had transmuted into something more complex. She painted joy now, painted the children with paint-covered hands, painted Margaret laughing at something one of the students had said, painted the river at different times of day, learning its moods the way you learn a person by living with them. She painted the life she was living instead of the life she had lost. And somewhere in that shift, she had found something she had been chasing since her father died. Peace, not the absence of pain, but the presence of purpose large enough to hold the pain without being consumed by it. The paintings she exchanged with Alex continued. Every 2 weeks, one of them would send something new. The canvases were getting larger, more ambitious, more honest. Emma had sent him a self-portrait in July, the first she had painted since the scandal. She had not made herself beautiful or tragic or any of the things artists make themselves when they want to be seen favorably. She had painted herself tired and paint-stained and standing in front of a class of children who were not visible in the frame, but whose presence was implied by the way her face was turned, by the gesture of her hands mid-explanation. She had titled it, "This is Who I Am Now," and sent it without knowing if he would understand what she was offering. Proof that she had survived. Proof that she had become someone new. Proof that maybe she was ready to be seen again. Alex had responded with a painting that made her cry when she unwrapped it. He had painted the moment of Lily's last art class, the one she had taken 3 months before she died. He had painted his sister from memory, 15 years old, and smiling in a way he had almost forgotten she could. She was holding a brush and looking at a canvas with such concentration and joy that Emma understood immediately why Alex had built a foundation on her memory. This was what art could be, a reason to stay, a way to make sense of chaos, a proof that beauty existed even in darkness. He had titled it, "What I Am Fighting For," and Emma had understood that this was his truth, that everything he had done, every mistake he had made, came from this place of trying to honor a girl who had needed help and not received it in time. She called him that night, the first time they had spoken since the gallery disaster 5 months ago. Her hands shook as she dialed the number she had memorized but never used. The digits burned into her memory from the business card he had given her that first day at the cafe, before everything became complicated. When he answered on the second ring, his voice rough with surprise and hope, and something that sounded like relief so profound it hurt to hear, she almost hung up. Her thumb hovered over the red button, but she made herself speak because some conversations could not be had through paintings, because some truths required voices, because after 5 months of silence, she needed to hear him say her name. "I got your painting, Emma." Just her name, said like a prayer or a plea or both, said like someone who had been holding their breath for months and could finally exhale. The sound of it made her chest ache. She was beautiful. "Your sister. I can see why you miss her." Emma's voice was barely above a whisper, aware that she was touching something sacred, something Alex rarely let anyone see. Every day, Alex's voice was thick with the weight of 5 years of grief that had not lightened even slightly. Every single day, I wonder what she would have become if someone had just listened when she said she was drowning. If I had listened, instead of being too busy with college applications and my own life, to notice my little sister was dying right in front of me. "You were 17, you were a kid yourself. Old enough to see. Old enough to help. Old enough to save her if I had just paid attention. I think she would be proud of what you built. Even after everything. Even after Robert. Even after me. You are still fighting for kids like her. That matters, Alex. That counts for something. Are you still fighting, or did I destroy that for you too?" Emma looked around her small apartment, at the paintings covering every wall like proof of survival, at the sketchbooks filled with the faces of children she taught and the progress they had made, at the evidence of a life rebuilt from wreckage through sheer, stubborn refusal to disappear. Yes, just differently than I thought I would be. Smaller maybe, quieter, but still fighting. They talked for 2 hours, not about the scandal or the pain or the impossible distance between their worlds, about art and teaching and the small miracles of watching someone discover they matter. about Mia's progress and Lucas's transformation, and the grant money that had changed everything for Riverside, about Robert's trial and Victoria's unexpected help, and the foundation's slow rebuilding of reputation through transparent action, about the weather and books and the specific way light fell in their respective cities, about nothing and everything, about the texture of daily life when you are trying to be honest instead of impressive. When they finally said goodnight, Emma sat in the dark of her apartment and felt something shift in her chest, something that had been holding very tight for very long beginning to relax. She was not ready to see him, was not ready to risk her heart again when the first attempt had nearly destroyed her, but maybe she was ready to imagine being ready. Maybe that was enough for now. Alex could not sleep after the call. He stood at his window looking at Manhattan and remembered the first time he had stood here thinking about Emma, the night she had picked him up by mistake, and reminded him what it felt like to be seen as a person instead of a resource. 6 months had passed since then. 6 months that felt like 6 years. 6 months of losing everything and learning what actually mattered. The foundation was different now, transparent in ways that made board meetings longer and more complicated, but also more honest. Every grant publicly listed, every decision documented, every dollar accounted for in reports anyone could access. The work was harder this way, slower, but it was right. And rightness, Alex had learned, was worth the inefficiency. Victoria had stayed on the board and become one of the foundation's strongest advocates. She had used her connections and her understanding of how power worked to rebuild relationships Robert had damaged. She had gone on record in interviews saying that she had been wrong about Emma, that the scandal had been manufactured by people with agendas that had nothing to do with truth. The public rehabilitation had been slow, but Victoria's willingness to admit her mistakes had started to shift the narrative. Emma Hayes was no longer just the gold digger who seduced a CEO. She was also the talented artist who had been destroyed by a system designed to punish ambition in poor people. It was not enough. It would never be enough, but it was something. Marcus appeared at Alex's office door the next morning with coffee and the expression of someone who had news. Good news, from the smile he was failing to suppress. What? James Morrison called. From Harbor Arts Collective. The gallery. The scene of the disaster. Alex felt his stomach clench. What did he want? He wants to do a retrospective, 6 months after the scandal. Emma's work and the work of 3 other artists who were impacted by Robert's embezzlement. Organizations that should have had funding and did not. Artists who kept creating anyway. He wants to call it surviving the system. That is for Emma to decide. I know, but he asked if you thought she would be interested. Said he tried to reach her, but her number is disconnected. It was. Emma had changed her phone number after the scandal to stop the harassing calls and messages. Only a few people had the new one. Give me his number. I will ask her. But, Marcus, this has to be her choice. No pressure, no foundation involvement. If she says no, we respect that. Understood. Alex called Emma that evening, told her about James Morrison's offer, waited while she processed it. I don't know if I can go back there. Her voice was small. To that gallery, to that city, to the place where everything fell apart. You do not have to. You are building something good in Riverside. You do not owe New York anything. But I owe myself something. Emma's voice strengthened. I owe myself the chance to show my work without shame, to prove that I am an artist regardless of who I know or do not know, to stand in that gallery and say this is my truth, and it matters. Then do it. Alex's heart was racing, and Emma, I will be there. Not on stage, not taking credit, just in the audience, witnessing. If you want me there. I want you there. 3 months later, November brought the first snow of the season to New York City. Emma stood in her old apartment in Astoria, the one Mr. Patterson had rented to someone else, but which Sophie had convinced him to let Emma use for the weekend. She was preparing for the retrospective opening that evening, and the weight of return pressed down on her shoulders like physical mass. Rachel arrived at 4 with makeup and moral support. Sophie came at 5 with the dress Emma would wear, a simple black sheath that Sophie had insisted on buying because this night mattered, and Emma deserved to look like she belonged. Linda arrived at 6 with wisdom and a flask of whiskey for courage. The three women who had held Emma together through her collapse now helped her prepare to stand back up in public. They did her makeup and fixed her hair and told her she was brave and beautiful, and that her father would be so proud. They reminded her that she had already survived the worst, that whatever happened tonight could not break what had already been broken and healed stronger. "How do you feel?" Rachel asked as they prepared to leave. Terrified. Emma looked at herself in the mirror, but also ready. "I am ready to be seen again. On my terms this time." The gallery was packed when they arrived. Press and critics and collectors and the curious who wanted to see if Emma Hayes would show her face after the scandal. James Morrison had curated the show brilliantly. Emma's 3 paintings from the original disaster opening, the ones that had hung for 47 minutes before being taken down, were displayed in the center. Around them, the work of 3 other artists whose grants had been blocked by Robert's embezzlement: a sculptor from the Bronx, a photographer from Newark, a mixed media artist from Philadelphia, all people who had kept creating despite the system designed to erase them. The title wall read, "Surviving the System," in letters 3 feet high. Below it, an artist's statement that James had worked with Emma to write. This exhibition features artists who were denied funding meant for them because of embezzlement at Sterling Foundation. They continued creating anyway. This is what survival looks like. This is what resistance looks like. This is proof that art matters more than money. Emma stood in front of her paintings and felt the weight of eyes on her. Some sympathetic, some skeptical, some hungry for scandal or redemption or whatever narrative would sell papers. She made herself stand tall, made herself meet their gazes, made herself exist loudly in a space that had tried to erase her. Alex arrived at 7:30. He stood in the back of the gallery, far from Emma, giving her space to have this moment without his presence complicating it. But she saw him. Across the crowded room, through the press of bodies, their eyes met. He did not smile or wave or do anything to draw attention. He simply stood there, witnessing, the way he had promised. The speeches started at 8. James talked about the importance of supporting artists regardless of their connections or background. The sculptor talked about the year she almost gave up before finding out her grant had been approved and then stolen. The photographer talked about taking pictures of his neighborhood, because if he did not document his community, no one would. Then it was Emma's turn. She stood at the microphone and looked at the faces in front of her. Some she knew, most she did not. All of them waiting to see if she would break or bend or provide the spectacle they had come for. 6 months ago, I stood in this gallery and had my dream destroyed in front of an audience. Emma's voice was steady. I was accused of using my relationship with Alexander Sterling to advance my career, of being a gold digger, of not deserving the opportunity I was given. Some of those accusations were true. I did know Alex. I did benefit indirectly from foundation funding. But what the scandal missed was the 20 years I spent painting before I met him, the countless hours I spent learning my craft, the canvases I filled while choosing between art supplies and groceries. My father taught me that making art is resistance, that creating beauty is how poor people prove we are not just our poverty, that our vision of the world matters even when the world tells us it does not. She paused, looking directly at the cameras, at the critics, at the people who had written think pieces about her character, without knowing her name before the scandal. I am here tonight because I refuse to be erased, because my work has value regardless of who I know, because I am not going to let shame silence me when I have nothing to be ashamed of. I loved someone I should not have loved in a way that complicated everything. But that does not make me a gold digger. It makes me human. And being human while poor is not a crime, even though our society treats it like one. The room was silent. Emma felt tears on her face but did not wipe them away. Let them see her cry. Let them see her refuse to hide. To every artist who has been told they do not deserve opportunities because of where they come from, or who they know or do not know, I see you. Keep creating. Keep fighting. Keep proving that we matter. That is what this exhibition is about. Not me, not the scandal, but all of us who survive systems designed to crush us and keep making beauty anyway. The applause started slowly, then built. Emma stepped away from the microphone and found herself surrounded by people wanting to shake her hand, tell her she was brave, share their own stories of being erased and fighting back. She answered questions and thanked supporters and let herself be celebrated in a way she had never allowed before. The scandal taught her she had nothing left to lose. At 10 o'clock, when the crowd had thinned, Alex approached. They stood 3 feet apart, neither moving closer, the distance between them still complicated by history and hurt, and the very real question of whether some gaps were too wide to bridge. "You were extraordinary," he said. "I was honest. That is all I know how to be anymore. It is the best thing to be." He looked at her paintings, at the work she had made from pain and poverty and the refusal to disappear. "I am sorry I did not protect you better. I am sorry my help became the thing that hurt you. I am sorry for all of it." "I know." Emma's voice was soft. "And I am sorry I could not separate you from your money. I am sorry I ran instead of fighting. I am sorry I made you the villain when you were trying to be the solution. We were both trying, both failing, both learning." Yes. They stood in silence, the gallery emptying around them, just 2 people who had loved badly and lost everything, and were trying to figure out if there was a path forward that did not require one of them to give up themselves. "I do not know if we can do this," Emma said finally. "Be together. Build something. The gap between our worlds is real. Your money will always complicate things. My pride will always make me resist help. We are set up to fail." "Maybe," Alex met her eyes, "but maybe we are also set up to succeed differently than we thought. Not as savior and victim, not as patron and artist, as 2 people who care about the same mission and are willing to fight for it in different ways. I do not want to save you, Emma. I want to stand beside you while you save yourself, and maybe let you stand beside me while I try to do the same." What does that look like? Honest, transparent, boundaries. You run your art program your way. I run the foundation my way. We consult each other, but do not control each other. We acknowledge that my money creates power imbalances and work actively to counteract them. We fail sometimes. We keep trying anyway. That sounds hard. Everything worth doing is hard. Alex took a small step closer. "But Emma, I am willing to do hard things if it means a chance with you. I am willing to have uncomfortable conversations and set boundaries and be called out when I overstep. I am willing to earn your trust instead of assuming I deserve it. I am willing to spend the rest of my life proving that love is not about fixing or saving, but about witnessing and supporting and showing up even when it would be easier to walk away." Emma felt something in her chest that had been locked tight begin to open. She thought about the paintings they had exchanged, the conversations that could not happen in words, the 6 months of learning who they were when everything else was stripped away. "I am willing to try," she said, "but slowly, with rules, with honesty even when it hurts, with the understanding that if this does not work, we walk away with dignity instead of destruction." "Deal." Alex held out his hand, formal and slightly ridiculous. Emma took it and felt electricity run through the contact. Some things did not change. The chemistry was still there. The question was whether chemistry was enough when the world was designed to keep them apart. They started over, not fresh starts because you cannot erase history, but new beginnings built on the wreckage of old endings. Alex came to Riverside once a month, staying in a bed and breakfast in town, and spending the weekend watching Emma teach and painting alongside her in her studio. He did not offer advice or money or solutions. He simply showed up, learned her rhythms, met her students, sat in the back of her classes, and understood why this work mattered more than galleries. Emma came to the city twice a month, staying with Sophie and attending foundation events where Alex made clear to everyone that she was not his assistant or his project, but his partner, someone whose opinion on arts funding mattered because she had lived the struggle the foundation existed to address. She joined the Grants Review Committee, started pushing for changes in how applications were evaluated, made the foundation uncomfortable in ways that forced it to be better. They fought sometimes, about money and power and the 1,000 ways class difference showed up even when both of them were trying. But they had learned how to fight productively, how to name the problem instead of blaming the person, how to take breaks when emotions ran too hot, how to come back to the table and try again. By spring, they had a rhythm that worked. By summer, they had stopped being careful and started being real. By fall, they were ready for something more. The proposal happened on the park bench where they had first shown each other their paintings. December again. Full circle. Alex had brought coffee, 2 cups with exact sugar proportions. Emma had brought a new painting, something she had not shown anyone yet. The painting showed 2 people holding paintbrushes, not reaching toward the same brush anymore, each holding their own, working on the same canvas but from different sides. The image emerging was a bridge made of color, solid and strong and built by both of them. She titled it, "We Built This." Alex looked at it for a long time. Then he pulled out a small box from his coat pocket. "I do not have a ring yet. We are going to pick it out together because I am not making decisions for you anymore. But I have a question." Emma's heart was racing. "Emma Hayes, will you marry me? Not because I can fix your life or you can validate mine, but because after everything, all the mistakes and scandals and pain, I love you. I love who you are when you are teaching kids. I love who you are when you are fighting me about foundation policy. I love who you are when you are painting at 3 a.m. because the truth in your chest demands to exist. I love you messy and complicated and real. And I want to spend the rest of my life building something with you that neither of us could build alone." Emma was crying. "Yes, God, yes. But Alex, I need you to understand something. I am never going to stop being difficult. I am never going to just agree with you to keep peace. I am going to push you and challenge you and make you uncomfortable when you are wrong. I am going to put my students first and my art first and my integrity first. You are going to have to be okay loving someone who does not need you to complete her. I am counting on it." He smiled, and Emma saw in his face the boy he must have been before grief made him old. "I do not want to complete you. I want to compliment you. To be the person who holds your ladder while you paint murals, who argues with you about budgets and then admits when you are right, who shows up for your students' exhibitions and learns their names, who loves you for exactly who you are, not who I need you to be." They kissed on that bench in December cold, and it felt like coming home, like finding the country where your language is spoken, like proof that some mistakes lead exactly where you need to go. The wedding was small and deliberately so, a conscious choice to celebrate intimacy over spectacle after their relationship had been made too public too soon. Sophie's backyard in June, transformed with string lights and wildflowers that Emma and Mia had picked themselves from fields outside Riverside. 50 people who mattered sitting in mismatched chairs borrowed from the community center. Emma wore a dress she had designed herself, simple white linen that she had then covered in deliberate paint stains, small explosions of color at the hem and sleeves, because this was who she was: artist, teacher, woman who made beauty from struggle, woman who refused to pretend she was anything other than exactly herself, paint stains and all. Alex wore a suit that cost less than he usually spent, a fact that only Marcus and Emma knew, because Emma had asked him to donate the difference to the art center, and he had understood immediately that this was how their life together would work. Constant negotiation, constant choosing the mission over comfort, constant awareness that every dollar had meaning beyond its purchasing power, that money was not neutral, that how you spent it was how you voted for the world you wanted to exist. Mia was the flower girl, now 10 years old and painting with confidence, that took Emma's breath away every time she saw new work emerge from the girl's increasingly skilled hands. She wore a blue dress and sneakers because Emma had told her comfort mattered more than appearance, and Mia had taken that lesson to heart. Rachel and Linda stood with Emma as her attendants, the women who had held her together when she was falling apart, now standing witness to her putting herself back together differently, stronger. Marcus stood with Alex, the friendship between them forged over a decade of working together to build something that mattered more than profit or prestige. Victoria attended and cried through the whole ceremony, tears streaming down her face in a way that made her mascara run, and did not care, mourning what she had lost and celebrating what these two had found. She had sent a card the week before with a single line: "You chose right. I chose wrong. Thank you for showing me the difference." Emma had called her, and they had talked for an hour, 2 women who had heard each other finding a way toward something that was not quite friendship, but was definitely not enmity. Understanding, maybe. respect for different paths through similar struggles. The vows were written together, negotiated over weeks of conversations about what marriage meant when you came from different worlds. When power imbalances were baked into every interaction by systems neither of them had created, but both of them had to navigate. They promised to be honest, even when it hurt, to fight fair, to respect boundaries even when respecting them felt like rejection, to build something bigger than either of them alone could build, to use their resources, Alex's money and Emma's experience, to change systems instead of just helping individuals cope with broken systems, to create opportunities that did not require knowing the right people or having the right last name or being born into the right zip code, to be transparent when power imbalances showed up and work actively to minimize them instead of pretending they did not exist. They promised to love each other on purpose, to choose each other daily, to remember that love was action, not feeling, that showing up mattered more than dramatic gestures, that building a life together meant being willing to be uncomfortable, to be challenged, to be changed by each other in ways that made them better. Margaret Chen officiated because she understood both of them in ways few others could. When she pronounced them married, the backyard erupted in cheers, but Emma was looking at Alex and Alex was looking at Emma, and neither of them saw anyone else, just each other. Finally, completely, without shame or fear or the need to be anything other than exactly who they were. 1 year later, they stood together at the opening of the Hayes Sterling Center for Arts Education. Not Sterling Hayes. Emma's name first because this had been her dream before it was theirs. A converted warehouse in Queens with studio space for 50 students, scholarships funded by Sterling Foundation, but administered independently by a board Emma chaired, teachers paid living wages, supplies unlimited, and one rule above all others: every child who wanted to learn could learn. No fees, no applications, no gatekeeping, just doors open to anyone who needed art to survive. The center was filled with paintings by students ranging from 6 to 60. Proof that creativity did not have an age limit or a class requirement. Proof that given resources and encouragement, people made beauty. Proof that Emma had been right all along. Art was resistance. Art was survival. Art was how you proved you mattered when the world told you that you did not. Alex stood back and watched Emma move through the crowd, stopping to talk to every student, to celebrate every painting, to make every person feel seen. This was why he had built Sterling Foundation. Not for the tax benefits or the legacy or the public perception. For this. For rooms full of people discovering they had voices worth hearing. Emma found him in the corner and took his hand. "We did it." "You did it. I just helped fund it." "We did it together." She squeezed his hand. "And Alex, I need to tell you something." He turned to face her, saw something in her expression that made his heart speed up. "I am pregnant." The world stopped, restarted, became completely different in the space of 3 words. "Are you serious?" 3 months. I wanted to be sure before I told you." Her hand went to her stomach. "We are going to have a baby. And Alex, I am terrified and excited and have no idea how to do this, but I know I want to do it with you." He kissed her there in the middle of the crowded gallery, both of them crying, both of them laughing, both of them overwhelmed by the impossible gift of getting to build a future after they had both been so certain the past had destroyed them. The baby arrived in spring, a girl. They named her Lily Grace Hayes Sterling. Lily for Alex's sister, the girl whose life had been too short, but whose impact continued through the foundation built in her name. Grace, because both Emma and Alex understood that second chances were grace, that love was grace, that forgiveness was grace. Hayes Sterling because they were partners equals, and their daughter would carry both their names as proof that families could be built across divides that the world insisted could not be bridged. Emma painted Lily's nursery with murals showing children painting, showing the art center, showing the life they had built from wreckage. She painted hope that acknowledged pain. She painted beauty that did not erase struggle. She painted the truth she wanted her daughter to inherit, that making art mattered, that fighting systems mattered, that being poor did not mean being worthless, that love across class divides was possible if both people were willing to do the hard work of equality. Alex stood in the doorway watching his wife paint, while their daughter slept in the bassinet beside her, and felt something he had not felt since Lily died. Wholeness. not the absence of loss, but the presence of love large enough to hold the loss without being consumed by it. 5 years later, Mia graduated from high school with a full scholarship to Rhode Island School of Design. Emma and Alex sat in the audience and cried as she gave her valedictorian speech, thanking the Hayes Sterling Center for teaching her that art was not a luxury, but a necessity. That beauty made by poor hands was no less valuable than beauty made by rich ones. That she mattered regardless of where she came from. 10 years later, the center had expanded to 3 locations across New York, served 2,000 students a year, had a waiting list of 0 because Emma had insisted that if there was demand, they found funding. Sterling Foundation had grown too, funding 200 programs nationwide, all selected by committees that included artists who had lived the struggle, all administered with transparency that made every dollar visible, all evaluated not by how impressive they looked, but by how many lives they changed. Victoria became one of the center's biggest advocates, funding a sculpture studio and teaching occasional workshops about the cost of giving up your art for security. She never remarried, never sculpted again, but she showed up for every exhibition and told her story to anyone who would listen. The cautionary tale, the woman who chose wrong and spent the rest of her life trying to help others choose right. Linda's daughter Maya became an art teacher. Rachel's son Tyler became a photographer. The children who had been invisible found ways to make themselves seen. And Emma and Alex watched it all and understood that this was the work. Not the dramatic rescues or the grand gestures, but the slow, steady accumulation of chances given to people who deserved them, of doors open to people who had been locked out, of proof that talent mattered more than connections when you built systems that valued talent over connections. On a December evening, 20 years after Emma had picked up the wrong person at the airport, she and Alex stood in the original Hayes Sterling Center, watching their daughter Lily give her first solo exhibition. The girl was 17, talented in ways that terrified and thrilled Emma in equal measure, painting subjects that were political and personal and unapologetic, paintings about class and race and gender, and all the ways the world tried to make people small. Paintings that proved she had inherited not just her parents' love of art, but their understanding that making art was resistance. The exhibition was titled Making Room, and every painting showed spaces being expanded, walls being torn down, bridges being built. It was about more than art. It was about the world her parents had fought to create. A world where a barista could become an artist, where a CEO could learn humility, where mistakes could lead to redemption, where love could survive systems designed to kill it. Emma stood beside Alex and remembered the girl she had been, 26 years old, and certain her life was over. Painting in a freezing apartment and wondering if she mattered. Picking up a stranger at the airport and accidentally changing everything. "Do you ever regret it?" she asked Alex quietly. "The mess we made getting here?" "Never," he took her hand. "Every mistake led exactly where we needed to go." Emma looked at her daughter's paintings, at the room full of people celebrating work that challenged them, at the life she had built not despite her struggles, but because of them, at the man beside her who had learned to love without controlling, to help without diminishing, to stand beside instead of standing over. "Me neither," she said, "not for a second." Outside, snow was falling on the city that had broken them and remade them. Inside, Lily was explaining her work to a critic, confident and articulate and unafraid. The Hayes Sterling Center would close in an hour, but it would open again tomorrow, and the day after, and the day after that, because the work was never finished, because there would always be children who needed to know they mattered, because art was resistance and survival and proof of existence, and because 2 people had made mistakes that looked like endings, but were actually beginnings, had built something from nothing, had proven that love across impossible divides was possible if you were willing to fight for it, had learned that happy endings were not clean or perfect or tied with bows. They were messy and hard-earned and required showing up every day to choose each other and the mission over comfort and ease. Some mistakes, they had learned, were not meant to be corrected. They were meant to teach you everything you needed to know about who you were and who you could become. They were meant to break you so you could rebuild yourself stronger. They were meant to lead you home, even when home was a place you had never been before. The space between them, once so vast and terrifying, had become the ground they stood on together, the foundation they built their life on. The proof that distance could become closeness if both people were willing to walk toward each other instead of away. Emma squeezed Alex's hand. He squeezed back. And in that small gesture was everything: the history and the hope, the pain and the promise, the truth that some stories do not end happily ever after. They end with ever after, which is harder and better and more real, which is worth every mistake it took to find. This was the story of two people who picked each other up by accident and chose each other on purpose, who lost everything and found what actually mattered, who learned that love was not about grand gestures but about showing up, about fighting fair, about building together what neither could build alone. This was the story of proving that sometimes the wrong person is exactly right, that sometimes what looks like failure is actually the beginning of everything, that sometimes you have to be broken before you can be whole. This was their story, messy and complicated and true, and it was enough. More than enough, it was everything.